The Committee of Whole will please come to order. The next bill for our consideration. Oh, we have a privilege of the floor. I completely forgot already. Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, privilege of the floor.
Go ahead, please.
Members of the House, first of all, I'd like to apologize for my voice. If I sound like a frog today. Today I have a very special friend with me up in the South Gallery, young lady with her mother. I'd like to tell you a little bit about her. She's right up here. This is Kaylee. Kaylee is a kind-hearted 8-year-old from Cheyenne. She has a strong passion for gymnastics, participated in Diamond Elite Gymnastics, her first competition this last year. She placed second all around in her state competition. Everly spends countless hours each week perfecting routines as she's determined to always do her best. Everly is the oldest of 3 children. She takes pride in being a good example to her little brother and sister. Deeply rooted in her faith, Everly's strength and inspiration in her love for God, each which guides her daily choices. She has assisted her church in fundraising for Life Choice Pregnancy Center, knowing that even the smallest citizen counts. Everly is currently enjoying the 2nd grade and dreams of becoming a gymnastic coach. Being inspired by her own coaches, she is determined, she combines her zest for life and with desire to help others, envisioning a future where she makes a positive impact on her community, one back handspring at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Everly and her mother, Kayla.
Welcome to the House, Everly. Thank you for being here. Okay, the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 83. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 83, sponsored by Representative Pendergraft. Child custody, sex offense, conviction, presumption, and act relating to domestic relations. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 83, child custody, sex offense, conviction, presumption, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Brady, Bratton, Chestick, Filer, Kelly, Lean, Singh, Washit, Webb. Representative Singh, Vice Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Washit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when Committee of the Whole rises to report to do so with the recommendation that House Bill 83 do pass. And I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee amendments that I'll explain now. So on the Standing Committee amendment, you'll notice that we've changed the word presumption to a rebuttable presumption on 2 places, on page 1, line 2, and on page 2, line 23. So by a rebuttable presumption, there's still a presumption, but the other side can argue whether the presumption is appropriate. And then on page 3, line 5, we changed that to be effective immediately. And that's the Standing Committee amendment, and I ask your favorable consideration.
Any further discussion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Representative Pendergraft?
It's just I rise in favor of this amendment. It is a friendly amendment and it does help the bill, so please vote aye.
Okay, question being called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel compelled to mention, if you're listening in the gallery, if you're listening online with children in the room, this bill does deal with some adult issues. And so you might want to take a break. Folks, I bring you House Bill 83. It is a very simple bill about a very complex issue. It is an issue that comes kind of at the confluence of parental rights and what do we do with sex offenders. It's a very personal bill. Several years ago, my former son-in-law molested his niece. He went to prison. He came out as a registered sex offender. And during the negotiation process, tried to gain custody of his 4 children with my daughter as that was breaking apart. And long story short, he was granted unsupervised visitation of my granddaughter, and he molested her. My daughter was forced to surrender her daughter unfairly to someone who was not in a position to resist. And so it was not fair to either victim. Now, since then, he has gone back to prison. He will come out continued registered as a sex offender, but he's already positioning in court to be able to gain unsupervised visitation in the future. And so frustrated by this and not wanting this to happen, this is what I came up with. And I want you to know that I spent time with several judges, both Supreme Court justices, 2 of them. I spent time with district court judges and wanted to get a little bit of a perspective about what it's like for them when they have somebody come before them in a case like this, and they have that kind of gut instinct, but there's nothing in the statute that allows you to really do anything. And to an individual, they all confess that that was frustrating at times. You sit there and you don't have anything concrete in the statute. And so you have to make a judgment that perhaps goes against your instinct. So what this does, in my view, is it gives a judge in a divorce custody action a statutory hook to hang a hunch upon. It protects potential victims, including the perpetrators. My daughter likened it to if you have trouble with alcohol and somebody goes and pours a drink and sets it on your nightstand and says, go to sleep, have a nice night, don't drink the drink. It's a little tough. So anyway, I just very quickly walked through the bill. It was already explained that we've changed this to a rebuttable presumption. That was one thing that was brought up by several attorneys. And essentially said what that means is this is something that an attorney or a judge can argue against. So the presumption here is that it is not in the best interest of the child for someone who is a registered sex offender to have unsupervised visitation of the child. That's the presumption. So normal cases, that's just the way it would go. But if there are extenuating circumstances, certainly you're welcome to argue those, and it could go anyway. So that's pretty simply, I think, a way of explaining that. If you turn to page 2, I would draw your attention to lines 13 through 15, and the statute that we're adding this language to is just a list of considerations that a judge is asked to take in mind before ordering the disposition of a child in such a case. And it says whether either parent has a conviction for which the parent must register as a sex offender under the Wyoming statutes. Now, this is one of those bills that could be what if. What if some young man had an indiscriminate moment when he was 16 years old and got caught in the parking lot? And that's not what this is about. This is about specifically a sex offender and protecting any children that may be involved and protecting the sex offender as well. I think I've pretty well driven this thing home hard enough. I ask for your support for this. Whatever happened to my granddaughter has happened, and we were all victims. And this is my appeal that God forbid it ever happen again. Questions?
Any questions or further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Washett's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 83 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 83 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 72.
House Bill 72, sponsored by Representative Lawley, Protecting Women's Privacy and Public Spaces Act, an act relating to the administration of government. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4 Education, to whom is referred House Bill 72, Protecting Women's Privacy and Public Spaces Act, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Bratton, Erickson, Guggenmoss, Kelly, Lawley, Singh, Strzok, Williams. Representative Andrew, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 72 do and I further move the standing committee amendment. And turn over the explanation to the sponsor.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I present to you House Bill 72, Women's Privacy in Public Spaces, and I ask for your favorable consideration. I will want to just talk a little bit about the bill, why I'm doing the bill, and what it does, and then we'll talk about the amendments, and then we'll go through the bill together. House Bill 72 ensures that women and girls are safe and respected in places where privacy is essential: bathrooms, locker rooms, showers, overnight accommodations, and correctional facilities. The bill provides clarity and consistent common sense policies that prioritize privacy and safety. And it provides it in places like public schools, higher educations, and correctional facilities. House Bill 72 sets a clear standard that men cannot access women's intimate spaces like showers, restrooms, and housing facilities, and gives women a way to hold institutions accountable when these protections are violated. 12 other states have enacted women's privacy protections, and many other states are considering bills even this year. Unfortunately, men who assert a female identity are currently allowed to enter women's private spaces like showers, restrooms, and changing areas. We have documented incidents of this. We heard from some people from school districts and others about issues that they have had here in Wyoming. I've been contacted by school board members. Like many of you, I heard a lot about this on the campaign trail, going door to door. In fact, I would say I heard about this issue more than even property taxes, which I did hear about property taxes, but this was something that weighed heavily on the minds of many Wyomingites. And their view was basically this: it's just not that hard, and we should be able to provide clarity and direction. I've heard many stories, like you probably have, of discomfort and fear when the policies aren't clear, leaving institutions scrambling to balance privacy concerns with the risk of lawsuits. What most of my constituents told me was it was time for the legislature to act, that this was our role to set what the policy would be in this area. I want to go through the bill and then close with a little bit, Mr. Chairman. So if you have your copy or have it pulled up, you're going to see, first of all, a lot of definitions and those definitions are important to guide you through the other parts of the bill. And after the definitions, you're going to see the bill broken down into basically two broad categories. The first one is public facilities, and under the category of public facilities, which begins on page 5 at line 6, 9-25-102, public facilities, under the area of public facilities, we also include correctional facilities. And then broadly, if you turn over to page 8, line 14, you'll see a new section related to educational facilities. That's really important to know that as you work through the bill, because you're going to see some differences in how we treat educational facilities because of the issue of children, young children sometimes, and what we know, the different activities, if you will, that happen in things within a public school realm, activities and things that might need to be addressed in the bill. And I just want to say this too about the bill, and you're going to see this in the amendments as well. I have been open to constructive things that people say about, what about this situation? If it was, usually I can say, look at this section, it's covered here, maybe in one way in education, one way in public facilities, slightly different because of the context. But there's been a few places we're going to have a couple of amendments that I think will demonstrate a real desire to address some specific issues that may not have been clear, so that we can talk about those, because I think they are important. So I just point that out to you, but I really worked hard on this bill and worked with some others that are familiar with this space legally as we navigated. And I just want you though first to see that, because that sometimes is confusing. They'll read the part about public, and then they'll ask me a question about educational that really has got some more specifics that answer their question. So just see that basic division of the bill. And what you'll see happening then is that in the public facilities area that includes the prisons, we have some different specific statements of policy. And I want to say this before I get into the details of that as well, as it's kind of important to look at and think about what the language means, these two different things: single use, multi-use. Single use, multi-use, because we're going to see that single use is always an option. Multi-use is what we're really targeting in the bill and saying, this is what we need to have some ground rules in. Obviously, single use, anyone can use a single use restroom. So you're going to see that either multiple use or multiple occupancy type language as you work through. But we see under public facilities on line 5, page 5, line 19, no person shall enter a changing area, restroom, or sleeping quarters that is designated for males or females unless the person is a member of that sex. That's kind of the bottom line for the whole bill, really, but that's for those public spaces. Then you're going to see some exceptions as we move into page 6. We're going to talk about, starting in line 9, that this section shall not apply to. And again, I think common sense exceptions, and some of these are areas that are conspicuously designated for unisex use, for example. And then you're going to see things like an employee who enters a changing area or sleeping quarters to clean or maintain. They're going to have special permissions as long as it's not occupied. And you can go through those. I'm not going to read them to you. I know you can well read. And employees for the performance of their official duties, natural disasters, things like that. So there's some exceptions. If there's a natural disaster and someone needs assistance and help, obviously that's an exception to this situation as written out in the statute. One of the things we do here is we do create a cause of action for violation of the rules and the protections. And you can see that in the bottom of page 7. And then we get into page 8, and we actually then focus a little bit on correctional facilities. And I want to say this. Many people have said to me, I never thought, Martha, about correctional facilities. Actually, we have quite a bit of information and evidence of why this is needed in correctional facilities. And we did hear testimony in committee from the our department, the department who handles things like corrections, and they had no objection to the bill and said they're really already complying with it. But that was welcome to have clarity for policy going forward, as there are times that transgender folks are sentenced to prison. So, and there's some causes of action related to that. And then on page 8, we really get into what I think is some of the meat of the bill on educational facilities. And again, you can read those. Some of them are very similar to what you see in public facilities, but the education piece is more nuanced and deals with the variety of activities that educational institutions are involved in. And again, once again, the same pattern of exceptions that are in the statute. And there is a distinction in the statute of limitation for public buildings versus for educational facilities. Normal cause of action, for the public facilities, it's 2 years to bring any cause of action. But in the educational space, we made it 4 years, partly because sometimes children don't report things right away, and just to give some space there for that. And with that, I think what I'll do is go ahead and talk about the amendment that has already been moved, which is Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 72. This was an amendment I brought to the committee. Again, there were some folks that in the educational space felt they needed a little bit more clarity concerning a situation. When you have a coach or some kind of a leader with a group in school that is of a different sex than the team or the group, and what would happen in those cases, particularly like in a locker room where they might normally gather. And so what you see in this First Amendment really is broader than just a coach. That was one of the concerns that we faced was, well, if we just make it about coaches, it's not really getting to the broader idea. So we made it about really a school official or employee who enters these areas. And basically what it says is that they will take reasonable steps to ensure that no person in the room is in a state of undress. So there are many options that still exist under the law, like in even those situations of trying to meet together. They can designate, for example, they would be able to designate 30 minutes before it's time for the locker room to be occupied to use it if there's no other meeting space in a smaller school they're traveling to. But to designate it as a meeting room, have their meeting, the coach leave, and then they begin what they need to do in that locker room. So, but this, again, amendment, and I would actually, it's been moved, so I would stand for any questions that you might have on the amendment, but it's simply giving that clarity for those in the educational space to know how they can navigate some of those kinds of situations.
Is there any further discussion on Standing Committee Amendment Number 1?
Question?
Question being called. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, say aye. Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 72 and ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill does is relate to another situation that was brought to my attention that wasn't clear in the bill, and that was about caregivers. What happens when you have a caregiver that's taking care of someone of the opposite sex? So that could be someone taking care of a young child, or that could be someone taking care of an older adult or a disabled adult. And so you'll see what we've done is insert caregivers in 2 of the exceptions that are already there. So if you see on page 6, line 23, after assistance, we insert caregiving assistance. And on page 11, line 7, after assistance, we also insert caregiving assistance. So it's really clear that there is an exception there for that situation. So again, I would ask for your favorable consideration of that amendment.
Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a quick question, is caregiving or caregiver defined someplace in statute, or we just use the common understanding of the term?
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fantastic question. Let me look. I don't think we do define it here, but that is a very good point. And we'll look at that maybe for second reading amendment. Sounds great.
Any further discussion on the amendment?
Question.
Seeing none, question being called. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, please say aye. Opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that women and girls deserve to have their privacy safeguarded. And the right to privacy and safety should not be dependent on others' beliefs about gender. Our executive over the federal government, the very first day in office, signed several executive orders, and one of the first ones was an executive order on this very issue. And the reason I point it out and in that way is because I believe it was a matter of priority by the fact he did it on the first day. He had a lot of executive orders to sign. He couldn't sign them all in one day. But he signed an executive order that is entitled, and I'm not going to read it to you, but I want you to hear the title, Defending Women from Gender Ideology, Extremism, and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. Ladies and gentlemen, that is in many ways what this bill is trying to do in this particular space of these places where women have long had safety and privacy. And that's what we're addressing. And in many ways, that executive order, again, I'm not going to read it to you, but it touches these same bases of biological definitions, that's what we're going to use, that there will be common sense policies put in place to protect women, and in this case, women's privacy. So I would ask again for an aye vote on House Bill 72. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can stand for questions.
Any questions on House Bill 72? Representative Jarvis.
Thank you, Chairman. And these questions are really just to the bringer of the bill for clarification as well. Much like you said, the constituents have come to you and asked these questions. So the first one that I have is on page 9, and I'm going to kind of skip around a little bit. Line 9 through line 11, where it talks about the educational facilities that offer housing for student residents. How does it work for marriage housing? And so that's my first question, because it doesn't take into account that they can provide, because I know pretty much every university and college in our state has that type of housing available, because the way that it's written here seems to exclude the ability to provide that moving forward. The next question I have is like in section D, 13 through 17, where it's saying that the only time that a child of an opposite sex can stay in a room on any type of event is with a parent. How does that work when, like, for instance, I had 2 really active athletes who moved in different directions constantly and continuously. And so there were many times where I was caught being able to go to go with one of my children, and where I was sending with another parent, and I would write permission for that parent to be able to take my kid. How does, I'm just kind of looking at how that works in those types of situations. Some of the other questions that I have, and you kind of, I appreciate the caregiving, because it does really, the way that it's written, come out that any parent with an opposite sex child can't take them into a stall bathroom, that they have to use the single stall bathroom. And I don't know if any of you have traveled around our state and been in our school facilities, but our single stalls are typically like tucked back in the staff office area in schools. And our multi-bathrooms for all of our activities and our sports tend to be in an area that can be barricaded off, where a lot of the schools will put up gates and walls to keep the general public out of different areas that they don't want to have to manage, because it's hard enough to manage the human beings in the gymnasiums and then those areas than to be wandering all over the entire schools looking for those people to make sure that nothing is happening. So it's that question that I kind of have. Those single stall bathrooms aren't readily available in a lot of our public buildings, government buildings. And that being said, I went on Monday a scavenger hunt adventure in this specific building to find where those single stall bathrooms are. We, other than opening up the House and the Senate corridors, the only single stall bathroom that is available there isn't one in the Capitol, but there is one in the Hirschler, and I don't know if I can say these building names, for which there's one available. So that puts people, families kind of in that position as well, having to hike with small children who need to use the bathroom right now. So it's more just looking at how does this work? And then there are certain situations where chaperones, depending on the age of the kids, sometimes like having a mom chaperone a whole bunch of young boys that are totally okay with it hasn't been a concern in the past, but this would make it so those things cannot happen anymore. And I guess my other question is because it talks about for coaches, being a former high school coach, the whiteboards are in the locker rooms. And so is it okay for coaches to go in after everybody's dressed and actually be able to talk to your players in that locker room, or is it not okay anymore? Because it wouldn't be an emergency situation or a care providing or a health providing situation. It would be a coaching situation. So I guess let me look and see if I have any more. And then when we designate, so like for locker rooms, because our locker rooms for athletics, I see that you took an account for that. So you can basically, you would put up signage saying it's now only for a women's locker room is only to be used for the opposing men's team. There are those crazy situations where, oh my gosh, I forgot my tennis shoes. Can somebody go in and help get those things out? And so there are a lot of those just gray areas where this is definitive. And I know you say that common sense, we should apply common sense. But when you're asking to apply common sense, and then in this bill, there's a $5,000 fine attached to it, I kind of see the good people of Wyoming wanting to just follow it as is. And I see that being a little difficult when, like, the one thing that comes to mind is when you're looking at those USA young kids wrestling tournaments, and you have a whole bunch of parents standing outside the single stall bathroom and not being allowed to use the multi-stall bathroom to take their kids in and out. I don't see the Wyoming people being super ecstatic about that, and I'm not sure that that's what I'm not sure that's what they're asking for. Thank you.
Representative Lally. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A great deal of those questions were answered by the amendments we just passed. I'm not sure if the representative followed those, but the caregiver creates an exception. So that takes care of that. They don't have to go to just a single-use one. So the issue of coaches was addressed and the possibility of whether or not they could go in for some period of time where there was a whiteboard. It was addressed in the Standing Committee Amendment number 1, because it specifically talks about the conditions, which is that everyone is in a state of dress. So we have accommodated almost every one of those. Now, I didn't quite get the very first question, so of what type of housing you were referring to. I just didn't hear it. So if she wants to get to that, but I think it's the idea of the rooms here, housing for student residents, is a broad term that's being used. So if there's something specific, I can try to answer that, but I honestly didn't even catch what it was on that one. So for example, it doesn't use the term dorm rooms. It uses student housing, which is a very broad context for the many types of housing that the university or community colleges might provide. So again, that's all for there, I think.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the bringer of the bill, just a quick question. I thoroughly understand the reason for the Standing Committee amendment, but I was looking on page 10 where you talk about single-sex changing areas or restrooms, and specifically on line 18, there's kind of I guess I'd call it like a squishy standard that's used on that line. I'm curious if you think that could be abused, and I'm talking about the term reasonably available.
Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have concerns about this bill, a question, but more of a comment, I think. One of my concerns is enforceability. How is one to know whether you have shared a bathroom with a transgender person? Because I know several transgendered people who look like the gender they have chosen. To all outward appearances, for example, a transgender man who has a full beard, looks to all outward appearances to be male. This bill would require that man to go to a women's bathroom, which is going to be uncomfortable not only for the transgender man, but also for all the women who may be in that public space and sees a man entering the bathroom. I just wonder, so maybe there's no single occupancy bathroom nearby or available. This creates problems for transgender people. And it also creates some uncomfortable situations for cisgender people who have to now share bathrooms with somebody who looks like the opposite sex. And I wonder, I'm opposed to the bill for that reason, among others, but that to me is a problem. I'm not sure there's any way to solve that problem.
Representative Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, to the good representative near Yellowstone Park, I would say that this provision that you pointed out on page 10, starting on line 15 through 21, is about primarily addressing situations where you have a tournament at school. And so we're going to redesignate some of the locker room areas for the sake of all women's basketball tournament. So if there's no reasonable facility other than using what was normally being used as the men's locker room, they can temporarily redesignate for that purpose. It gives our facilities, especially in our smaller schools, a little flexibility. And that's really what that provision is trying to address. So, and again, I understand that there can be some situations that might be uncomfortable or difficult to navigate at times. But as I said in the beginning of my presentation, This is about prioritizing the safety and the dignity of women. And we will do what we can. I think you're going to see a shift to more single bathrooms being built and being available for people, single use. Many buildings, airports have gone to that, a lot more of those you see. So again, we have to prioritize, and I believe the priority here is safety, and we will try to work through some of these other issues. They, in my view, as I said, they do not overrule the priority we have for the safety and the privacy of women in these intimate spaces. So, thank you.
Representative Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the bringer of this bill. And I just want, and for the potential amendment that's coming on the definition of caregiver, I just want to make sure that the word chaperone. Chaperone is that slippery slope. I wouldn't say a chaperone potentially as a caregiver, but just to make sure as a chaperone or people from our church or my husband takes a group of youth group and there's a lot of females that he's a chaperone. So just making sure that in that definition that is addressed. And again, as a grandmother of 2 grandsons, 2 and 4, that we go to a lot of public school events and just learning to use a restroom, that just making sure we're taking that into account. So thank you.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you. I really appreciate those suggestions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those suggestions, and actually, I think both of those are contemplated in when we were using the term caregivers, but I appreciate the suggestion, so thank you.
Representative Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I received an email from our head official at one of our big transportation facilities in our fair city. And they only have multi-use restrooms inside that facility. And they have limited number of staff other than the TSA people and so forth that might be present. And so his question was, what's the expectation of this bill? If they're facing a $5,000 fine, what are we expecting of these public facilities that don't have single-use restrooms presently? Are they going to be mandated to install them? Are they going to have to hire staff to stand watch at the doors, those sorts of things? So what's the expectation of the bill?
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question. It's a really good question. And I will just say, first of all, I am working on a second reading amendment that I think will help that situation as best we can and still honor the purposes of the bill. But the expectation is found in where the cause of action is created in the bill, which it says reasonable. One thing they can't do is say, you know what, go ahead and use the women's restroom, or go ahead and use the men. The bill specifically says you cannot do that. You can't send them to a place of their opposite sex or give permission to. But other than that, it's reasonable, what a reasonable person would do. But you're going to see some filling that in a little bit. Like, for example, some examples of reasonableness would be putting up good signage and some things like that. But really, it's about taking reasonable steps to make sure, like they do every other in those big transportation places, they have lots of people we have lots of little steps and regulations we participate in when we are in there trying to get somewhere, and they have policies about how to enforce it. So that would be another reasonable step, is to develop some policies about what to do and what the expectation are of employees. And so I think that will help get us there, and I think help that situation more and bring clarity to those situations. So, but it was a good question, and again, trying to make this something that is practical and common sense. But I would say this in general to those situations. This is asking us to do what we do in every other area where we are following signage, customs, expectations socially. So it's not like it's trying to give a heavier duty. It's just saying that this is the responsibility of the facility to put this policy in place with some with some policies of their own and signage as examples, but it doesn't relieve them from just acting as a reasonable person would. Maybe we should say you would act as if it was your daughter in that restroom. So,
Representative Jarvis.
Thank you, Chairman. And to answer your previous question, when you said you didn't hear the very first thing that I said married housing. Just that, how does it take into account for that? But the additional question that I have is on page 6, line 22. And the way it's worded, a person who enters a changing area, restroom, or sleeping quarters to render medical assistance, and then you have, or caregiving assistance. Does this mean that I have to go into the men's bathroom with my son? Or that I can, because the way it's worded, it kind of suggests that. Or that I can bring my son into my bathroom. Thank you.
Representative Lawley.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you give me again that page number on the last question? And I'm not sure where you are. I'm on page 6, but where are you?
Representative Jarvis.
Thank you, Chairman. Line 22.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, married student housing, the bill is contemplating a situation as it concerns the university and the assignment of housing, consent. So it's without a consent of someone, you can not assign them a transgender in that place. And so, but a married student housing may be different. To be honest with you, I think that takes care of itself, but I don't know that it needs to be on the bill, but if you'd like to add it, we can do it. So the other question, I'm still not even sure what you're saying. We're just saying that there is an exception. So when there's a person entering a changing room to render medical assistance or caregiver assistance, it's not really directing you to use a particular bathroom. I think what it's comprehending or contemplating, is if you are entering, you have a young son, that you can bring that young son in under the caregiver exception to the women's bathroom as what we would normally do already. I just caution the body to not make it harder than it is. We can have some genuine questions, but sometimes we are just making it harder than it is. So that's what I would say to that. That's really what it's contemplating, is so you don't have an issue with taking your own son into the women's bathroom, as mothers have done from time beginning, and this does not change that.
Any further discussion on the bill?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Andrews' motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 72 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. House Bill 72 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 235. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 235, sponsored by Representative Andrew. Career Technical Education, Equipment and Supplies, an act relating to public school finance. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 235, Career Technical Education, Equipment and Supplies, respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Andrew, Bratton, Erickson, Guggenmoss, Kelly, Lawley, Strzok, Williams. Noes. Representative Singh. Representative Andrew, Chairman. This bill was re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 235, Career Technical Education, Equipment and Supplies, respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes. Representatives Alaman, Angelos, Baer, Haroldson, Pendergraft, Sherwood, Smith. Representative Baer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 235 do pass, and I further move the Standing Committee amendment. Members, House Bill 235 ensures that career and technical education funding is used as intended to prepare Wyoming students for the workforce. Right now, the block grant funds generated directly by enrollment in high school CTE programs are not always being spent on these programs. The portion meant for materials, supplies, and equipment is being used in areas that have nothing to do with CTE. While this is allowed under the current block grant system, it defeats the purpose of these funds. CTE is critical to Wyoming's economy. Our key industries need trained workers, but without proper investment in these programs, we are failing our students and our businesses. Last year, 55.1% of these funds were reported to be spent in the intended areas. This means that nearly half of the funding was used elsewhere. Even though roughly 60% of today's job openings require CTE skills, we can't afford to continue this trend. 235 pulls this funding from the block grant and creates a categorical grant that directs these funds where they belong, to materials, supplies, and equipment that prepare students for the jobs. And additionally, the amendment that we have does two things. It makes this an automatic grant so that no one has to, neither the department or the school districts have to go through the work of applying for it. They just get it, it's reserved for this purpose. They can save it if they want to for larger purchases, like large pieces of equipment. The second thing that it does is it incorporates what the effects of House Bill 18. We passed that bill through the House, and it essentially adds more money for smaller schools to help with the struggles of these smaller classes that may not be getting enough to fund these supplies. So since it dealt with the same thing, we just reincorporated that into this bill.
Is there any discussion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Question being called. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Is there any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Andrews' motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so at the recommendation that House Bill 235 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 235 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 200. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 200, sponsored by Representative Webb. Parent Rights Amendments, an act relating to education. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 4 Education, to whom is referred House Bill 200, Parents' Rights Amendments, respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Bratton, Erickson, Guggenmoss, Kelly, Singh, Strzok. Noes, Representative Lawley and Williams. Representative Andrew, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Andrew? 200.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 200 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee amendments, and I turn over the explanation to the sponsor.
Representative Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to make sure everybody is on the correct version of this because there was a substitute bill. And in order to get to it, go to House Bill 200, click the Amendments tab, and click on Substitute Number 1 so that we're all on the same page. The intent of House Bill 200 was an attempt to plug some holes in Wyoming Statute 21-3-135, which was put into effect last year after Senate File 9 was passed by the legislature. This bill further defines some of the items in existing law, and it adds some definitions, and it adds a few components concerning attendance, at assemblies, trainings, and the use of pronouns. So let's walk through some of those items. We'll go to page 2, lines 10 and 11. We add the term in there, school district personnel, to be more definitive. On lines 16 through 19, we get more definitive when changes of a student's mental, emotional, or physical health must be reported to a parent. That time extends beyond regular school hours, but also goes while the student is engaged in any activity, extracurricular activity, event, program, or function where school district personnel are responsible for the student regardless of location. You might want to keep that phrase in mind because we'll make reference to it 2 more times. On page 3, line 6, we can again become more definitive. And specify that no school policy developed that discourages, an added word, school district personnel from notifying a parent, and then back to that phrase again, during school hours and when the student is involved in a function regardless of location, as shown on lines 9 through 12. Lastly, on page 3, lines 20 and 21, we've added diversity, equity, and inclusion to the list of items existing in existing law that the school must receive written electronic permission from the parents before the student can participate. On page 4, lines 1 through 7, it says that the schools must notify the parent at least 5 days before a student participates in an activity or assembly that addresses sexual orientation, gender identity, or diversity, equity, or inclusion, and provides for an option for the parents to opt the student out of that activity or assembly. Lines 9 through 13 has districts adopt a policy whereby the school district personnel and students are not required to refer to a student using the student's preferred pronoun if the pronoun does not align with that student's biological sex. And then on lines 15 through 19, this has districts adopt a policy to allow the school district personnel to withdraw or opt out of any mandatory classes or trainings involving diversity, equity, or inclusion. Turning to page 5, lines 9 through 12, we again see the clause including the times when a student is engaged in the student activity regardless of location, which has to do with routine health. On page 5, lines 19 through 21, we see the definition of abuse has been deleted. This definition has simply been moved to a new section in the bill, which we will discuss shortly. On page 6, lines 1 through 11, it requires that at the beginning of the 2025-2026 school year, each district shall make available to parents and publish on the school website all written policies, practices, and procedures. It goes on to say that if policies or procedures are added or changed during the school year, that those policies must be made available to parents and updated on the school website within 30 days. Beginning on page 6, line 13 through page 9, line 18 are the definitions that have been added to this section. And lastly, on page 9, line 2, it sets an effective date for July 1st of 2025. As stated earlier, the bill further defines or clarifies some items in existing law, adds the 3 components concerning attendance at assemblies or trainings and use of pronouns. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Are there any questions on the standing committee amendment? Substitute bill. Question being called on standing committee amendment number 1, which is the substitute bill. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill, which is now the entire amendment. So any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Andrews' motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so at the recommendation that House Bill 200 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 200 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 245. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 245, sponsored by Representative Knapp. Pen and paper ballots, an act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 245, pen and paper ballots, respect the report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Alaman, Angelos, Bear, Haroldson, Pendergraft, Smith. Noes, Representative Sherwood. Representative Bear, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Bear?
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 245 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee amendments. I will ask that the Chairman of Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions give the explanation.
Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. If everybody could look at their desks, yesterday was passed out a barcode sheet. If you could get that out for reference, looks like this. Okay. And first, I will dispatch with the amendment. Basically, I've described election integrity as three things, correct? One is the ability to vote, the right to vote. One is the chain of custody, and the other is the audit capability. So if we can keep those three things in mind, the amendment has to do with the number one thing, and that is the ability or the right to vote. So with this amendment, I simply included that even though we would use paper and pen ballots as a first measure, that the screen for disabilities, and in particular pertaining to the Help America Vote Act of 2002, is included in the bill. So that would be the amendment. And I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Okay. So, Representative, there is no standing committee amendment. I don't think that was one, so it's a committee of the whole.
I'm sorry, let me
So,
move that.
Yeah, if you can move that, then we can go ahead and vote on that if there's no discussion.
I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report it, do so with the recommendation that Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 do pass.
Any discussion on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1? Question being called. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, please say aye. Opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this bill basically is a pen and paper bill. And if you look at your document there, what ends up happening is in certain counties, you are using pen and paper. In other counties, you're using a touchscreen. And on this touchscreen, you have your votes that you lay out and select. And then you're printed off this, what looks like a receipt almost. And on that receipt, it has barcodes and then underneath the issues. So if you look at the barcode, that's how you tell who you voted for. Okay, so if you can get some idea, I can read this and have no idea who the votes were for. So that tends to violate that ability for chain of custody because you no longer can see who you cast your ballot for. So this is actually what's counted and tabulated. Okay, there's no ballot that prints out that you can identify your votes with. So that's one of the reasons for this bill, is to take care of that aspect of it. The other is, if you remember the three integrity items. The first is the right to vote, the second is the chain of custody, but the third is the audit capability. Because it prints out this way and we have no source code, the source code to these machines are proprietary. So the clerks do not have them. So when you go back to audit, it makes it very difficult in that situation to use that form as an audit. So that basically is what covers the bill. And again, my big concern too is that people with disabilities or seniors that want to use a touchscreen, that will still be available. That will still be available. So they can still use that to vote, and it's written into the bill. And with that, I'll take questions.
Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. For maybe the sponsor or the committee that heard the bill, from my understanding, this bill only affects one county, the most populous county in the state, the one that we're in right now. What is the fiscal, so there's no fiscal impact to the state, but what's the fiscal impact to the county? It seems like all of their machines do this, right? So what's the cost of replacing all of those machines? And is that a burden that we are going to lay on the county, or is that a burden that we're going to help them with?
Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This bill acts as a default as a method to vote. So those machines would still be available. There would be a cost to having marked ballots or in-person voting, but since that is the case all over the rest of the state, that won't be a huge cost just to that county.
Any further discussion? Oh, no. No further discussion on the bill? Question being called. Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to that last point, so if the county that we're in doesn't have to change its system, what's the point of the bill?
Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I can summarize that still. Again, the problem with this type of voting would be the chain of custody, because we don't know what those barcodes mean. We don't have the source coding. It's proprietary, so that's one reason. The second reason is in an audit situation, that makes it very difficult to go back and look at an actual paper ballot to match with the vote. So those are the two reasons. And because it's only in one county now, doesn't mean it can spread to other counties in voting that way. I think this county has used that as a preference, but this would standardize it throughout the state and make that the preference.
Any further discussion on the bill? Oh, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was in the committee that heard this bill and just want to share some of that testimony that we did hear that there would be a cost to add more paper ballots. So in the county that we're in now, they anticipate the cost of paper ballots will go up, but they also anticipated that the cost of voter education would increase, because right now the feedback that they're getting from voters is that they prefer voting with these machines. So there would have to be education as we move away from them, going back to using the paper ballot. So there is a financial impact, yet there is no fiscal note on this, and that's something that did come up in testimony. I also would like to just add that currently there is a process through the Secretary of State's office to request machines, and the Secretary of State maintains currently in law the ability to approve a machine or regulate the type of machine that is used. So there is a checks and balance in place with these. And what else did we hear? From testimony, we heard that using the machines can create will create more accuracy because it doesn't allow people to overvote, that the machine will tell you, vote for one, vote for no more than two, and won't let you accidentally overvote. So there is an increased accuracy in using the machines. The last thing I'll share with you guys is the idea of like, why are we changing policy? Why do we like this or we don't like this? And this is what we're on the floor to debate. We heard in testimony from the good Secretary of State that he didn't like the experience of using the machine. So his personal preference is ballots. So I would ask the body to consider that we don't remove personal preference from our constituents, that we let them vote the way that most fulfills them. So if somebody walks in and says, I want to use the machine, great. Somebody walks in and says, I want to use paper, great. Let's leave that option up to the constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder not to use Secretary of State or other top electeds. It's all right. Just a gentle reminder. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, so just so I can get some more clarity from the bill sponsor again, does the county that we're in need to replace their machines or not? And how much would that cost? And is the county bearing that cost?
Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I imagine the way that this would place out is they don't need to replace their machines. The machines would still be available for those people that deemed it necessary to use the machine. So that's answering that. And in regard to the other speaker, one of the reasons that we would do this is I can't read who I voted for. The machine barcoded who was voted for. This actually is in litigation currently as a lawsuit has been presented to that particular county.
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another issue that we're looking at is the bill that we passed out of this body been a couple days ago, talking about hand count audits. These are problematic because if you're going through and doing a hand count audit and you pick up a ballot that all you have is barcodes, you're once again required to trust a system that could have a flaw in it to give you the answer if that were to be the case. And so as I've talked to our local officials that help manage our elections, as I talk to them, there is not currently a system that gives a printed out ballot that you can read, but it is in the works, which would help. And in turn, and in time, could help alleviate that issue. But currently these ballots, and when you get the barcoded ballots like this, would make, definitely make issues when it comes to audits and hand count audits.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So maybe I've missed something here. So does this apply just to one county or does this apply to the state of Wyoming? That's my question. I'm missing something, I think.
Representative Yin.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Okay, so what I heard was that this is to make it the default. Got it. Okay. So then they would have to buy a machine for every voting center that they have voting machines, so they could provide that as the default and then still allow the touch screens for other people who don't want to use the default. I mean, there's still a cost there, right? They still have to buy machines for all of those voting centers, and they have to buy enough so people could handle it as the default. So still curious on what the cost of each of those individual machines are, curious about what that county is going to have to pay to implement it, but also curious on why we would make it the default and not ban the touchscreen voting machines if there is a true concern about the ballots that come out of those machines. So I guess I'm confused on the point of the bill as well. If there's concern over those ballots, but we're not banning those machines, then why make this confusing default situation?
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm questioning if I have special glasses on for these barcodes, because I'm looking at the sheet that we were given, and it looks like this person with this special barcode voted, and I think I can say this out loud because it was a handout given to us, to every person who says, this person voted for U.S. President and U.S. Vice President Donald Trump, U.S. Senate, Representative Senator John Boozman. So looks like the names are on the piece of paper, not just the barcode, unless I have special powers and I'm Magic Woman. Thank you.
Representative Knapp.
I think your glasses are just fine, and God bless your magicalness. So a couple things to clear up. On the sheet of paper that you see, the barcode is the barcode, and the letters down below are the letters. What the counting machine looks at when it tabulates is not what's down here, it's the barcodes. And I can't tell you which barcode is equivalent to which name is down below. So that's number one. Number two, keep in mind, all of Wyoming uses pen and paper, except maybe this one county, and they probably use some pen and paper there. This basically, when you use pen and paper, you still use a machine that you put it into to tabulate it. So those machines stay. And in answer to the representative that was concerned that we would still be using a touchscreen in different places, absolutely, that's what you voted on for the amendment. The amendment is very important, and those machines as an option are very important because we do have people that need to use those machines, whether they have some impairment that would require that. So absolutely, yes. We do not want to disenfranchise our voters. So those voters with a handicap or with something that they would have an impairment with, absolutely, there would still be a machine that they could use as an option. Thank you.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess going back to the magic ballot, now that I've read the names out loud with my glasses, this is an Arkansas receipt. Wondering if I can get a printout of the present county's receipt to see what ours looks like, because this is, none of us voted for these people because they were on no one's ballot in our state.
Any further discussion on the bill? Are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Baer's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 245 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 245 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 202. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 202, sponsored by Representative Filer. Fast Track Permits Act, an act relating to city, county, state, and local powers. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 202, Fast Track Permits Act, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes. Representatives Andrew, Bratton, Erickson, Guggenmoss, Singh, Strzok. Noes, Representative Kelly, Lawley, and Williams. Representative Andrew, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 202 do pass, and I turn over the explanation to the sponsor.
Representative Filer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to move, correct a copy of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 202 also. And I'll probably go through the bill and then kind of fit where the amendment goes in, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman. Anyways, folks, I bring you guys House Bill 202. It's going to be the easiest bill we listened to this afternoon. What House Bill 202 does is called a fast track permit. So what it does is it allows somebody that's pulling a building permit within a permittable use zone to be able to have a little more timely manner and fashion, to get their permits through so they can get shovels in the ground. Right now, there's nothing in statute that says it has to be 10 days, 30 days, 45 days, or even over 1,000 days in some counties right now that are holding on to building permits. So what this bill does is helps define that to where everybody's, any municipality that has a building permit process, it keeps it pretty well uniform. So no matter where you're building, you got the same rules. So if you look on page 1, lines 4, it's permittable zoning use. And I think that's a very important term with this bill is permitted zoning use. On page 2, you'll start seeing some definitions. Delivered by electronic means, which means you can apply for your building a permit online. You don't have to always do it in by hand or something like that. And also allows the municipality to use that electronic means to be in touch with the applicant. Local entity, as we all know what that is, city, town, or county, or municipal or political subdivision that has a planning commission or a planning and zoning commission. On page 2, starting on line 17, I think this is kind of where it starts hitting the meat of this part of the bill, and also where I'll incorporate the standing or the committee of whole amendment. So on line 17, it says request means an application within the subject property's permitted zone use. Again, there's those words again, permitted zone use, for an approval from a local government entity for the action related to the development or improvement of property, including a building permit. And this is where that amendment will come in. After permit, we're gonna actually delete a period, and then we're gonna go through and say change or permitted zoning use, and then we're also gonna delete variance. But if we go over to the next page, I'm gonna add variance back in on page 3, lines 2, right after subdivision plats, we're gonna enter, or put in variances there. Why we did that, Mr. Chairman, is a lot of the municipalities, there is a lot of rules in places for, it might be a permittable use in that zone to get a building permit and go through this process a lot quicker. But sometimes there's a variance or a conditional use or a rezoning or a subdivision permit or a subdivision plat that could need that public comment. So it probably wouldn't fit very good on the fast track side of trying to get it, done within so many days, because you're gonna require extra comment there. So that's why I eliminated variance from that line 2 or line 22 on page 2, and we just added it over to page 3, line 2, right after plats. But if we could, I'd like to just get that voted on right now, if there's no questions on the committee of the whole amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion on the committee of the whole amendment? Question being called on committee of the whole amendment number 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Committee of the whole amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we keep going through here, one thing I want to go right back over to page 2 with that. Of course, now I just lost my spot here again. But on that page 2, on the bottom, now that we did that, so what it did is it says including building permits, and now that's all changed to take variance out. Now it's the request shall not include applications of the conditional use permits, rezonings, subdivision permits, subdivision plats, or temporary zone uses. And folks, that's the part where no matter what, you got to have a major public comment on there. You're going to have 45 days of public comment. It's going to have to go through another planning commission, get voted on by that municipality's body, whether it's county commissioners or possibly a city council, things like that. So it's very important to note that the permitting side, the building permit side, is definitely separate, and it does not overtake those precautions to make sure we have that public comment. I believe in transparency. But we can move on from there, Mr. Chairman. I think the next few paragraphs kind of just shows the written notice process. So if a government entity looks at your building, you turn in all your engineer drawings, your plot plans, your watershed studies, you do all the stuff that you're supposed to as the applicant. What this does is it says, okay, municipality, you must do your part and make sure you give this applicant written notice within so many days of approval or notes that need to be corrected so they can properly give the right information on the building permit to move their project through. Then it moves on from there, Mr. Chairman. What it does is, there's another part that kind of, it keeps the municipality in check. So right now, the municipalities in the state of Wyoming have all the control over an applicant, over a building project. So whatever that municipality says, whatever that building department says, you must do, or your project's not going to move forward, or you're not going to get approved and inspected. So what this does on page 5, starting on line 4, after you've done all the things that you're supposed to do as an applicant, and you've checked all your boxes, and then the county or the municipality decides, okay, we're stamping this, go ahead, go to work. That means they reviewed it, they've done their job. You go out and you start working and you call for an inspections. And you got an inspector that comes out to your building project, and the inspector says, oh, wait a minute, I forgot that you might need a bigger doorway here, or whatever it might be. But what happens then is, under those notes, you as the applicant and the builder have to make changes. It costs you money. Sometimes you got to go get re-engineered drawings done. So what this does is tells the municipality that since you didn't catch this like you were supposed to, also, there's going to be a 10% return fee on your permit. So when you pay for that permit fee, you'll get a 10% of your fees back for those troubles, because you're held accountable. So should the municipality, because this is what we pay for when we do permits. We pay for these checks and balances to make sure that our project is going on like it's supposed to, it's up to code and all those different things. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions, and I see some eyes rolling around, so I'll be happy to take on any questions.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the bringer of the bill, first of all, I like the idea of constraining the amount of time that those people who are doing work in this industry have to wait on our local governments. But I am concerned about the public being able to make comment, and you mentioned that. And I just would like you just to lay out exactly how public comment, especially on a rezoning situation, would take place in this constrained timeframe.
Representative Filer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to answer those questions, this bill has nothing to do with the public comment on rezoning. This will not affect or change that at all. As a matter of fact, if you are trying to rezone a piece of property, if you are an applicant, this is how the process does work. You actually request that from your municipality for a rezone. It's got to go through public comment, a lot of third-time readings. You got to deal with the planning department, and this bill has absolutely zero to do with that.
Representative Clouston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the bringer for bringing this. I understand the importance of this. Just a question that came up. Right now in my county, they're working on a 1,400-page document. You're giving them 60 days to kind of get this completed. Are there exceptions in this, and maybe looking at scope of scale? Representative? Okay, I'll repeat it all. So in my county right now, they're working on a large project. 1,400-page document has been turned in. It took them 6 months to get this planning document ready. This bill is only giving them 60 days to try to complete this review process. So is there maybe a scope of project that can be worked into this? And then on another one, page 4, I think it was line 15, the 10 days. So if someone's in a floodplain and they have to deal with one of the federal agencies, engineers that take care of water, if it's not the local municipality's issue, if they're waiting on the federal, how can we resolve that in this bill?
Representative Filer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great questions. And these have been brought up about 35 times to me now, and it's a good thing to have this discussion. But this bill, what it does is allows that the municipality notify the applicant in writing of why those dates can't be met. And one of those reasons could be the state might interfere, DEQ might interfere, or something like that. But then that alleviates that. And most of the time on a large project like that, I would say 99.9% of the time anybody that's been in building, a lot of those are going to fall under conditional uses, not just permittable uses. So that would fall into the whole gamut of public comment and things like that. But yes, if there is something that comes up like that, there is a provision here that the municipality notifies you in writing, which could be an email too, that says, hey, we need further comment on this because of a federal or state agency. And then that time, after all those questions are all done, everybody's questions are answered, that's when that time would start again. So it does give that leeway to the municipalities. It does not tie their hands.
Any further discussion? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was no vote in committee, but I'd just like to say that the Committee of the Whole amendment addressed most of my concerns. So if there was any question in my mind, it's been removed. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification, is this commercial and residential?
Representative Filer.
Mr. Chairman, yes, it is. It does both. And the reason why it does both is because we don't want to isolate one. It kind of gives everybody the same timeline. And I think another question that I just answered a little bit ago too, like sometimes you got this major, massive project and it takes, months, even years to probably get everything all put together to even submit to the municipality. But while you are building those together, you're actually meeting with those municipalities anyway, under all the different conditional uses. I think a lot of the question that you might be getting is the commercial permitted use part of it, right? So if that's what that is, what it is so say you already own a industrial building and you have a cabinet shop in that building and you've been working and building cabinets, but now you decide that you want to sell that part and change it over to a welding shop. That's where the commercial permittable use comes in. So you're going to go pull a building permit, but you don't have to go through the full public comment because it's already a permittable use in that commercial zone. So that way it doesn't stop the welding shop from opening up. It lets them go forward and keep moving forward. I hope that helps answer your question.
Any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Andrews' motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 202 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. House Bill 202 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our, did I hear? Okay, I didn't hear anything. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 273. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 273, sponsored by Representative Rodriguez Williams, Wyoming Pregnancy Centers, Autonomy and Rights, an act relating to public health and safety. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred House Bill 273, Wyoming Pregnancy Centers, Autonomy and Rights, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Klauston, Guggenmoss, Heft, McCann, Ottman, Rodriguez Williams, Wasserberger. Noes, Representative Yen. Excused, Representative Stivar. Representative Rodriguez Williams, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Vice Chair Ottman?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it will do so with the recommendation that Bill number 273 do pass. I'll turn the explanation of the bill over to Representative Rodriguez Williams.
No names, but go ahead, Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I introduced to the body House Bill 273, titled Wyoming Pregnancy Centers Autonomy and Rights. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill is titled the Pregnancy Care Center Autonomy and Rights of Expression, also known as the CARE Act. The CARE Act protects pregnancy centers by prohibiting state and local officials from forcing a pregnancy center to perform or refer a woman for abortion, ensuring that state and local officials cannot prohibit a pregnancy center from providing pregnancy care, counseling service, or any other service related to pregnancy, perinatal care, or postpartum care simply because it does not perform counsel in favor of or provide referrals for abortion, prohibiting state and local officials from seeking to limit the free expression and free association rights of pregnancy centers. This bill also provides a legal remedy for pregnancy centers when their rights are violated. Otherwise, centers may be left with no recourse when the government tramples over their rights. I explained in committee the reason for the bill. We do have centers in our great state, and since in the post-Dobbs era, they are increasing their life-affirming impact on communities, and the threat to them is real and growing. Walking through the bill, on page 2, we begin with legislative findings. On page 4, we list several definitions. And then moving on to page 8, we talked about what's prohibited, as I just kind of did a glance at, quick overview there. And then on page 10, we look at legal remedies and the right to intervention. And then moving on to page 11, line 15, granting immunity from tort liability or contracts. And I would stand for any questions.
Any discussion on the bill? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on page 8, where it says that the state and any of its political subdivisions shall not, through the adoption of any law, ordinance, resolution, policy measure, yada, 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 requirements and prohibitions. I guess my concern is if the Pregnancy Resource Center is doing something harmful to people, they've gone rogue, they are providing, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just if there's no ability to check and balance or do anything about them, if they are actually harming women, say they're giving procedures that are making women sick, or they're leaving people with infections, or their ultrasounds are found to be putting women at risk because the person giving the ultrasound can't determine that the pregnancy is at risk. What is there in place? What can we do to then intervene to try and protect the women that are going from a potential place that might not be giving the best care for our young mothers? Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you, and thank you to the representative for the question. So as I mentioned earlier, it states in the bill, and for those of you that are familiar with some of these centers, they do provide medical services, and they operate under the direction of a licensed Wyoming physician. And so, of course, they carry medical malpractice insurance, and they're just like any other medical clinic. You can file a complaint and do what you need to do to make that complaint with the process. So, thank you.
Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Chestic.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. While I do appreciate the answer that the bringer of the bill just gave us, I'm not sure it goes far enough. If you look on page 11, starting on line 15, there's a section dealing with granting immunity from tort liability. So you can say there's a cause of action for malpractice, except now we're granting them immunity. Malpractice is a tort. We're granting them immunity from that tort. So I don't think the malpractice remedy is effective when they're granted immunity.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would just seek a point of clarification between two bills now that we have discussed, House Bill 42 and House Bill 273. One mandates that facilities offering women's health will have complete oversight by the government. The other one says these facilities that offer services for women's health will have absolutely zero government oversight. So both affecting women's health and their option in terms of health care. One, complete oversight, and the other, zero oversight. So help me understand that, please.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Vice Chair Ottman's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 273 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 273 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 85. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 85, sponsored by Appropriations, local approving for simulcasting, an act relating to pari-mutuel wagering. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 85, local approval for simulcasting, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Byron, Campbell, Connolly, Harshman, Jarvis, Provenza, Storer, Wharf. Excused, Representative Thayer. Representative Byron, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Byron?
Thank you, Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 85 do pass. And I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee Amendment number 1. And to present the bill, you have to keep listening to me. Mr. Chairman, thank you. The Standing Committee Amendment, folks, is found by clicking on that nice link. And I want to go over that quickly because it certainly changes a number of items in the bill, then I'll walk through the bill. So on the Standing Committee Amendment, if you're following the amendment, there's some different definitions, and we're changing consent and inserting review and objection. Further on page 10, line 6, and continuing through page 11, it changes the definitions of simulcasting. The Standing Committee Amendment reinstates that existing language. Page 12, lines 1 through 7, inserts definitions of local approving authority. Pages 12, 13, 14 on the Standing Committee Amendment amends the language that the Standing Committee Amendment reinstated. And then the big hitter that may be discussed is page 15, lines 16 and 17. It repeals the 100-mile rule. Further, page 16 clarifies the grandfather clause and the effective date. So with that, we can certainly discuss that Standing Committee Amendment, but I ask for your favorable consideration.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman of TRW. If you'd just correct me, but talking about this being a local approval for simulcasting in the authority between the county and municipality, this Committee of the Whole, or the Standing Committee Amendment, was really a collaborative effort between those two organizations to put this into place. If I'm wrong, please correct that.
Representative Byron.
Thank you to my good neighbor over the big mountains that are windy. Yes, this is a product of many months of towns and counties getting together and working on this specific language. This is a bill that obviously came out of the former Appropriations Committee and got sent my way. But yes, you're correct, Representative, that this does exactly that. And I think it was a collaborative process to really allow for more local control of this, the subject matter in this bill.
Representative Baer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the chairman that brought the amendment, just a quick question about the 100-mile rule and how this particular amendment intersects with that. That rule's been in place since this particular industry was legalized in the state. So I'd like to know if this amendment affects the 100-mile rule.
Representative Byron.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the good Chairman of Committee Number 2 for that question. It certainly does. It does. What this does is repeal that 100-mile rule, which specifically for the situation in the county we currently exist in was a hot topic item, and it was discussed frequently in committee. And what it does is repeals it. So what formally would happen is if you had one of these racing facilities, horse racing facilities, they within 100 miles, the off-track machines would be shut down, only when the racetrack was running. So in theory, conceptually, second that horse race started, no bets could be placed within that 100 miles. And the point of the rule historically, and don't have this in my county, so bear with me, and I made lobby to another committee member, was so it drove people to the track. It drove those bettors to come participate in the live event and to participate in and keep these tracks alive and profitable and really encourage the participation of the day at the track. So what the standing committee amendment does is certainly does that. It repeals that. So these local, in this county specifically, they can continue to operate when this new track does become operational.
Representative Orff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to add that it was brought up in testimony that they saw no advantage to maintaining it. That was one of the reasons why they took it out, was they said that it didn't have an impact. That's what the Gaming Commission director told us, was that it had no impact. And consequently, that's why the 3 current operators supported the amendment that was put forward that took it out.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little more history on that. This was when we originally got racing going in Wyoming. This is a spillover from the East Coast where it's really prevalent back there where they utilize this 100-mile rule. It really doesn't apply to Wyoming, and it is an antiquated rule and just needed to be done away with, period.
Representative Claston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the last speaker. Are there any racing with mammoth jacks in Wyoming?
Representative Byron.
Question on the amendment. It'd be a slow race.
Question being called, and seeing no further discussion on Standing Committee Amendment Number 1. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, please say aye. Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Byron.
Thank you, good chairman. Folks, we're going to get into the bill now if you want. I'll do it quickly. It is a bit of a thicker bill compared to some of the other ones we've been seeing, but bill title, obviously, local approval for simulcasting, gives municipalities and counties more control over what happens in their local communities. There's been concern in the industry and certainly in our state that this gaming industry is growing rapidly. And this bill allows your local towns and counties that do allow it, not all districts and counties do, to have a little bit more control over where that goes. So lines 1 through 8 is the heart of the bill. It gives the municipality where the OTB facility would be located a right to say yes or no. Current statute only gives that county authority. Page 3 acknowledges that if the proposed site is within a half mile of the municipality does have a right to have a say in the situation. Page 3, lines 18 through 20, allows the governing body, either the city or the county, to limit the time a license is issued. Currently, these are kind of dealt on a county-by-county basis. Page 5, it is important language that it gives local notice that has been missing in the statute. It requires further requires public notification. Continuing page 6, lines 8 through lines. Page 6 through line 8 on page 7 outlines the governing body, again, a county or municipality, that can take into consideration and what they can require through the specific permitting process. So once again, using that term that we're throwing around a lot, the local control side of it. Page 7, 10 through 22, talks about the reasons for denial of an application potentially. Page 9 defines the renewal process. And with that, I certainly would be happy if there are further questions, getting the meat of the bill for anyone that was on the former committee number 2 that brought this. If they want to further expand on that, that's a quick walkthrough. But we had great support, great testimony in committee, and certainly those folks that represent our municipalities and our counties, to the good chairman of number 2, they came together, and his question was, did they work together and talk about this? They did. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Further discussion on the bill, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think when we talk about this local control, this bill was refined over probably about a dozen meetings of the interim. There was a lot of work that went into it. And the sliver in the hind end of the whole thing was if the county, as we had it, had total control of allowing or denying permits. And the municipalities were saying, wait, time out. What if we don't want it? Or what if we do want it? We have no say. And so I think there was just this really exceptional effort, because I think the municipalities recognized the value of the county and the county commission piece of it. And I think that the county commissioners also recognized that those municipalities needed to have more of a say than what they had. And this really is a product of that, allowing more flexibility in that. So it sounds pretty simple, but there's a lot that went to it. So really good job done by those folks, and well done to the presenter, and encourage an aye vote.
Further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Byron's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, does so with the recommendation that House Bill 85 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 85 has passed committee of the whole. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 181. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 181, sponsored by Representative Larson. Funeral contracts, investments, and bonding requirements, an act relating to insurance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3 revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 181, funeral contracts, investment and bonding requirements. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation to do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Brown, Campbell, Lean, Locke, Lucas, Storer, Stivar, Wharf. Excused, Representative Riggins. Representative Locke, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Locke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 181 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the standing committee amendments, and I yield the floor to the representative from kind of the center of the state as well, to explain both the bill and the standing amendment.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I'd like to explain the committee amendment, the standing committee amendment, and consider it for adoption. Folks, if you'd look on page 2, line 16, in the existing language, we refer to federal building and loan associations. And one of the members of the standing committee, having that financial background, said that those haven't been in existence for a while. And which is fun, because I really like updating statutes. And so what we do is we delete building and put the correct term in there, which is federal savings and loans. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would call for the question on the standing committee amendment.
Any further discussion on the standing committee amendment? Question being called. All those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1, please say aye. All opposed, no. Standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, as I look out over this group, I see in their eyes that I'm dying. But have no fear. We're going to talk about pre-need funeral arrangements. And I know we can talk about three-legged cats, but we won't. Folks, this bill came to me at the request of our Funeral Directors Association. Prepaid funeral arrangements are handled by the Department of Insurance and have been since they was created in 1977. In 1977, as it make references in the rules to retirement plans, they're called old age pension plans, still in our rules, and they refer to the Department of Health as the State Department of Public Assistance and Social Services. So it was time. It's time for a little change, and these arrangements have been around in our state since 1977, and they can be made through a variety of options. And currently, right now, you see a lot of these being done through an insurance plan purchased by a person through an approved agent selling such a product. And so we're not going to be talking about a funeral insurance plan. Boom. If you have one of them or your parents have one of them, we're not talking about those in this bill. The other common way to take care of funeral arrangements ahead of time is what's called a prepaid plan, which is purchased as a product directly from the funeral home, which is when the arrangement is made in a prepaid plan from the funeral home is not allowed to use the funds until the services agreed to have been provided, till the services have been provided at the time of death. The need for those services may not arise for many years, and the original amount paid for those services are subject to inflation. Acknowledging the impacts of inflation, funeral homes are allowed by the Insurance Commission rules to invest the funds used to purchase the prepaid plan in a variety of options to offset the impacts. The funeral homes are required by the Insurance Commission to have a surety bond covering 5% of the amount paid by the consumer, the total amount. And if the funeral home invests more than 5% of the funds in an investment other than passbook savings, a CD, very conservative approved plans, then those additional funds have to be covered also by an additional bond equivalent to the percentage of the investment. The cost of that bond is often in excess of the return made on the investment. This return, intended to add protection for the consumer, often requires the funeral home to provide the services agreed to at a loss to their business. Investment options, as you all understand, have changed in the decades since the statutes governing funeral homes was put into place. Statutes regulated investment of funds have also changed, including the requirements of investment firms to be fiduciaries of the funds they manage and to abide by the Uniform Prudent Investor Act, which is intended to help protect the investor. Funeral homes in Wyoming have formed an association and have the ability to pool the funds they each have from prepaid funeral plans and have those funds managed by an appropriate investment firm that comply with our current investment statutes. Pooling these funds is a similar exercise to that of our state treasurer when he takes multiple small funds like the Cultural Trust or the PBS Endowment and combines them along with others in what we call Pool A, where combined they can be invested for a greater total rate of return. In the case of the funeral homes, the funds invested in a pre-needs funeral trust by a fund manager would be placed in an irrevocable trust, meaning that neither the consumer nor the funeral home would have access to those funds until the person covered by the plan passes away, a death certificate is produced, and proof of the contractual services have been provided. And then at that time, a trustee would release the funds. If the funeral home goes out of business, the insurance commissioner can authorize the fund manager to release the prepaid funds to the entity that provided the services or to release the funds to the family of the deceased. Our rules, however, developed in 1977, does not contemplate this option and still requires the funeral homes to have a bond covering the amount of the funds being invested, thereby minimizing their investment growth. So we worked, this bill kind of came to me. It wasn't something that I was aware of, but I've really enjoyed working on it and really enjoyed working with the Insurance Commission and our LSO staff. And the current language in this bill is amended to acknowledge the Prudent Investor Act and allows the investments of funds into a pre-need funeral trust for the action to be an improved investment without the needs of additional bonding. This type of investment of funds generated through the sale of a pre-needs funeral plan is allowed in other states, and it continues to protect the public, requiring disclosures and requiring the trust to be irrevocable. I want to remind you that as we talked about these pre-need plans, the one that we're talking here on the pre-needs irrevocable trust would just be one additional option. They could do it in a revocable trust, where if I were the funeral home and you paid a pre-needs plan in a revocable trust, then there's the option for you to, at some time, if you wanted to cancel, you could. The funeral home could still invest in bonds or very conservative. This is just another option that really keeps up to date with what investments are allowed to do today. So if you would look at the bill on page 2, it talks about allowing those funds to be put into irrevocable pre-needs trusts in which the earnings and it's an improved investment. Earnings, including interest, income, and dividends from the investment of the irrevocable pre-needs trust may inure to the benefit of the seller of the prepaid trust. So we take care of how they're invested and how they're released. And then on the bottom of page 3, the rules will require that buyers of prepaid and prearranged funeral contracts of the type of investments to which the funds are derived. So as you go to buy a pre-needs funeral arrangement from a funeral home, they now will be required to explain the options that you have, how they're invested, and your access to them or lack of access to them until time of death and services are provided. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the legislation, I just want to bring one clarity that we had during committee. It was if you purchase a burial plan and move out of state, that those funds can then be transferred to your family based on a death certificate. And if your family doesn't track you down, but the funeral home gets notice that you have passed away, those funds are then put into the unclaimed property in the state of Wyoming so that your future heirs do have the opportunity to come back and get that money. One other thing that was clarified for us is that if you pay for a burial and your family decides to cremate you, the difference of that money can be returned to your family upon the death certificate. So these were just clarity questions on and for this to keep all of our funeral homes moving forward in Wyoming.
Further discussion, Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to say that I'm in agreement with my fellow county representative. The business that is in my town called, and I spoke with that gentleman for probably an hour and a half, just wondering because I really didn't understand. He was very thorough, very clear, and showed how this was not only good for the business, but also good for the community at large. So I am in support of this and ask that you would vote aye.
Representative Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to the good bringer of this bill, so if the funeral home is sold, I've read this like 3 times. I didn't see anything. That's not a stipulation or anything in this bill. If the funeral home is sold to another funeral home.
Representative Larson.
Thank you. So if the funeral home sold, or if the funeral home goes out of business, a variety of things, the pre-needs trust is transferred to new funeral home. But if a funeral home goes out of business, maybe the one in your town goes out of business, and another funeral home steps in, as they usually do, just to cover the costs of that, the insurance commissioner authorizes the trustee to release those funds to the entity that provided the services. And much like the good representative here said, even if that's in another state, or if the family paid for it, then the commissioner can authorize the agent to release the funds to the family.
Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, are you ready for the questions? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman, oh, now I'm blanking the chairman. Locke, that's right. Chairman Locke's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, does so with the recommendation that House Bill 181 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 181 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 4. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 4 is sponsored by Travel, Snowmobile Registration and User Fees, an act relating to motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom's referred House Bill 4, Snowmobile Registration and User Fees, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Byron, Campbell, Connolly, Harshman, Jarvis, Provenza, Storer, Thayer, Wharf. Representative Byron, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Byron?
Thank you, Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 4 do pass. And I will also explain the bill from a different side of the room. Folks, I bring you House Bill Committee Bill from your House TRW Committee, House Bill 4 through the interim, snowmobile registration and user fees. Obviously, this can get to be a hot topic item, so let me quickly just get to the gut of it. Right now, residents pay $35. They put a little sticker on your snowmobile. This bill raises that fee to $50. A non-resident currently doesn't have its own category, so this creates a new non-resident category. Commercial, which is using a lot of these trails that we're trying to fund right now, this grooming that's happening is going to go from 105 to 150. And then if you want to know about antique snowmobiles, I can teach you all about them. We have a new category, and an antique snowmobile will be a fee of $25. Folks, the snowmobile program in Wyoming, which touches a lot of our mountains, provides trail grooming services both in-house in our state trails department of state parks, and they do about 90,000 miles of grooming per year, 90,000 miles of grooming. They also cleared a lot of the trails and put 44,000 lath down to make sure these snowcats and those big, those snowy nights know where they're going. It also funds infrastructure, parking areas, equipment, safety shelters, which was talked a lot about in committee, helps with education programs, and helps fund some of the law enforcement rangers. The economic impact in a 2021 study of snowmobiling was $255 million to the state, which is pretty large. You know, the cats that are used to do this grooming when this fee was implemented in 2014 were about $200,000. Those now cost about $350,000. So it's starting to become very, very expensive. Right now, this department and this specific part of state parks is running in a deficit of about $400,000 a year. So without passage of this, the threat is we're going to have to start cutting services, which we're hearing a lot about in our discussions, and trying to pick and choose which trails may or may not get groomed moving into the future, what education programs may or may not get cut, and these safety shelters, which have been in existence forever, and very vital to when you have a mishap out there, you know, which ones we'll leave or take back. You know, I think it's really important to note this bill came through the interim committee. We heard it many times, talked about it, and not one single snowmobiler. And they showed up in many, many forms, whether or not they were for antique, for commercial, for personal, but they came from all over our state to the different interim committee meetings and asked for this. They asked us for this increase. The associations that support these folks, and they all join together and do big club rides and fundraisers for scholarships, et cetera. They all came and said, hey, we really like these trails. We want to keep paying for these. We did not hear one negative bit of testimony. With many, many opportunities in committee even. They showed back up and were very, very supportive of all this. So with that, I will stand for questions on House Bill 4.
Representative Geringer.
Mr. Chairman, I think I have to push back just a little bit. It's not a hot topic, it's a cold topic. That being said, a couple questions for the chairman of the auditors. The out-of-state permits, how will those be, how will it be verified and applied so that right now it's or it's been fairly easy, I think, for some out-of-state folks to be able to sign up for in-state permits because there's really been no check. So how will that be handled? And then also, I'm kind of curious on the antique snowmobiles. We actually still utilize a snowmobile that would now be considered antique. And what is the purpose of having an antique tag if it's not going to be used on the trails anyway? This is just for shows and things like that. So I'm kind of curious what the impetus is behind that.
Representative Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will talk about this cold topic. To the antique question, this came up and we went round and around. There are actually collectors in this state that own dozens and dozens, maybe upwards over 100. So they came and testified and said, hold on a second. And once again, with the antique specifically, it's a one-time fee. So they don't have to go back year over year. Once you make the eligibility requirement for an antique snowmobile, you pay your $25, you're good. These guys do ride the trails, and they testified to that. And they do races. I've never participated in one, nor have I seen one, but that's what we heard in testimony. That the antique, the number got thrown around. You know, we talked about how we view antique automobiles, and ultimately this is where we landed. So I think that's a good question. Yes, are there 20-year-old snowmobiles, 30-year-old snowmobiles that can access a lot of the trails in some of the deep parts of this our mountains? Absolutely, but we had to kind of draw the line somewhere. In terms of the out-of-state, this is continued discussion. How you're going to have to go ahead and online when you go and buy your sticker, signify an address, much like a hunting or fishing license, and where you're from, and sign to that effect. So that's how they will differentiate. You know, some of these folks were still doing it. You walk into the store, your local brick and mortar, you grab your sticker. They're really trying to trend this to an online option, and we talked a lot about that. But I think that clears up those two questions from the good bringer from this county.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this topic goes back a ways, but sitting on the committee, this is probably one of the few that we have had absolute 100% support from resident, from non-resident, from 100% support across the board in favor of this. So that tells you how important our trails are to the people who use them and their willingness to invest in, the equipment and the people to take care of our trails. Thank you.
Representative Brady.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question. When it comes to when you're grooming, there are certain areas in the state that you're able to do more grooming than elsewhere? Because I haven't myself even seen any. And I had a concern that if it was the fees are being raised, I know it's, by 50% technically. Are you getting more and more snowmobile enthusiasts to help pay for these fees, to help grooming, rather than have to jump it up technically 50%? Thank you.
Representative Byron.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take the second question first. We are seeing more and more, and those folks testified for this. I think it's important to note that the reason this number got landed on through a lot of different committee discussion through the interim was the hope is that this covers this program for the next 10 years. It is not their intent that they want to come back. Now, body, please know, anyone's welcome to come back and change this year over year. We have that discretion. That's why we're sitting in the seats we're sitting in. But I think it really was a good attempt by the department and working with the joint committee through the interim of saying, hey, and this is an expanding industry. More and more folks are showing up. I mean, I will say for that great hill, the great city over the hill, houses our university. 25 years ago, there was a little bit of snowmobiling there. Not super popular. I was over there last winter, and the entire west side of that interstate, they were stacked up and down the roads, heading up into the mountains that are snowy. So I really think, to your question, where are they grooming? Well, they're grooming 90,000 miles of trail a year. Any major mountain range that you can think of that is in our state is seeing these either in-house grooming. A lot of them are also contracted out. So the contract services have, they will hire someone just so they don't have to trailer these machines everywhere, and they will use folks There's testimony, one of the lodges up in the central part of the state, the gentleman owns a lodge, and he also has a grooming contract, so, you know, he gets done with the evening, hops in his groomer, and goes out, and it's his own personal. So there's contract services, but it is in every major major mountain range that has this activity, has some of these, not only grooming, but parking lot maintenance, safety shelters, and other, you know, things that help promote this sport.
Representative Geringer.
Mr. Chairman, just another quick follow-up, hopefully quick, on the antiques, since I'm getting to be one myself. The question I have is in section 31-2-410B, because that's what this refers back to for antique. It says all the activities, parades, exhibitions, tours, and will not be used for general snowmobile uses. So to me, that says that the antique snowmobile isn't going to be used generally on the trail. And so again, I'm trying to figure out why we would even need that tag, or how we would be allowed to use that kind of tag instead of something that we renew every year.
Representative Byron.
Thank you to the good bringer of that question. You know, I think this went back and forth in committee a lot, and the antique snowmobile question took up way more time than I would have ever thought. And you are continuing that trend, so I appreciate that. And I'm going to start getting cold on it. But, you know, I think you read that, and I appreciate that. Really where we got to is there are folks that testified that they raised their hand and said, we do this. We use our antique snowmobile for the intended purpose of this, and we want to pay this fee. We're going to ride it. In my neck of the woods, there's a hot springs 10 miles down a groomed trail. Gets groomed every night by a beautiful $350,000 snowcat. And there you go up there on, you know, right around the new year, and there are not only hundreds of snowmobiles, but there are some that might not make it back down the trail. So, you know, I think that really was a point of contention. I appreciate that comment. I'm happy to talk about it if you want to talk about a future amendment. But, you know, I think that we had to capture some of those folks and keep it simple for our LE to enforce this. And folks, especially as spring comes or you have maybe a lower snow year, people do bring these old vintage and antique type sleds out of the shed out back, and they get them primed up and they want to ride them, and they are using the resource, the trail system. They don't tend to go for the big powder days on those older sleds that are of similar origin year that you are.
Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I would add that the antique license is not an annual. It is something that's going to be used for special events. And so it's $25 for a lifetime. So that for folks that come into the state for a special event, it's a reasonable amount of money to pay for that particular sled. It's also worth noting that these prices haven't gone up since 2014. Enforcement rangers are out there checking IDs and on the ground for verification, and they have 95% compliance already. We expect that to continue. And just that the use continues to grow steadily, but the costs have gone up more significantly than the use. So that's the reason for the increase. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the bill? Question being, Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Byron, I was curious, could you add 30 miles to that 90,000 miles? From LaBarge Meadows to the Rock Creek Trailhead? There has been a groomer on that in 10 plus years. So for a 40% increase, I'm probably gonna have to be a no vote. Thank you.
And just a reminder, we don't call out other legislator names. Representative Byron, did you want to address the question?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't sit in one of these devices, and I don't groom the trails. So certainly that's a question I think you could take up with your local groomers, and they'd be happy to talk about it. You know, one of the pieces of testimony was that all they do is people continue to ask for more and more trails to be groomed. In my neck of the woods, last year was three new trailheads, and they need grooming for 5 to 10 miles. Never been groomed, and folks are coming and asking for it. So as we continue to expand the program, I think this is a worthy cause, and I call for the question.
Seeing no further discussion on the bill, question being called, All those in favor of Chairman Byron's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so at the recommendation that House Bill 4 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 4 is passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 205. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 205, sponsored by Representative Strzok, Wyoming State Fair Department, an act relating to the administration of government. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 205, Wyoming State Fair Department, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Davis, Eklund, Johnson, Ottman, Provenza, Schmid, Strzok, Winter. Representative Winter, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Winter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Bill number 205 do pass, and there are no amendments. And I've asked the sponsor of the bill to tell us about it.
Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Chairman. So this bill, all it does is the Wyoming State Fair would like to be under their own heading, their own department, no longer under the Department of Ag. And so really all it does is it streamlines the fair's operations. They're really actually working this way already. The only thing that the Ag Department has been doing is pretty much writing the checks. So like if you had a show for the state fair, and what happens is sometimes, things change and they have to write some checks. Pretty much that's all that the Ag Department was doing, was writing the checks. So it's just going to be underneath now its own department. It's no cost to the state. It just really streamlines it and gets rid of one step for the state fair. So thank you. Appreciate an eye on this.
Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Larson Lloyd.
So I apologize, I've not read this. So are you saying we're creating a new state agency?
Representative Strzok.
Thank you. I would say yes, in a sense, but it's taken there's no cost to it. It takes it out of the Department of Ag. It's the same people, everything, because actually what they do, they have board members from all these departments, but this just is streamlines. And so the Department of Ag actually was in favor of this, was actually looking forward to this. It will be less for them to have to deal with.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest that this might be a little bigger deal than what we're looking at here. And in fairness, I need to look at this a little bit and maybe some conversation later on, but I'm having a hard time thinking that we create a new state agency without additional costs. This is when we talk about the growth of government, in which we try to control. If we need to grow it, I get that. Maybe this is one of those things, but I think it's something that we don't take lightly and say it's not a big deal. I think we really have to be careful and make sure we completely understand, because now we've got a new director that is appointed by the governor, executive branch. Then you've got divisions within that agency, new section in the statutes. And so let's just think about this overnight and maybe the next couple of days to see if this is, so it's a little, I don't know, maybe it's too cozy in Department of Ag. That's where it's always been. It's an ag deal. And so I'm not sure that I understand why we need to jettison out of there, but maybe I'm wrong, and I'll certainly look into it. Would just exercise caution, please.
Representative Eklund.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree. Go ahead and read the bill, but what this does, I think, is reduce government. the Department of Ag has their hands full with what they're doing. They rubber stamp everything that the Fair Board approves and the director approves, and it just allows that small government, which already exists, to be more nimble in their decisions. But look at the bill. I think it's a good one.
Representative Strzok. Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In favor of this bill. When we had testimony in there, they came in and for the state fair, there's no additional money, no additional staff, and it's to give it its own budget out of the Department of Ag. That way, when decisions need to be met, they don't have to wait a month or 2 months for those meetings. So the director himself was there and said that everything was fine, that this went along with it, and that this would be a move in a positive direction.
Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Chairman. So pretty much even right here, it even states in this, the State Fair manager previously appointed by the State Fair Board shall serve as the temporary director for the department upon the effective date of the bill. And as soon as it's reasonably practicable, the State Fair Board shall appoint a director of the department. It's not adding anything to it. It's just streamlining it. It's working through it. So taking a lot of burden off the Department of Ag and actually just helping things move a lot faster. They've got problems because you've got a lot of weekend stuff happening during state fair and you've got to move right away to get in judges and they just need to have this freedom to be able to do a lot of that. And they really said this is just going to really help on both departments and for them to have their own. Thank you.
Representative Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Representative Strzok just mentioned, I believe it is a streamlining effort for the state and especially for the Department of Agriculture. So please vote aye.
And just a reminder, we don't call out each other's names. Any further discussion? Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In one of the conversations I had in clarity on this bill, it removes a layer of bureaucracy for the vendors that come into the fair as well. And so that they'll be able to issue timely refunds to those vendors or accept payments from those vendors more timely, as well as the 4-H judges or the organization that works with animals and children may have the opportunity to be able to hire judges in a more timely manner when they have somebody back out at the last minute for an emergency on and in favor of the bill.
Any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Winter's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 205 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 205 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Joint Resolution 1. The reading clerk will read the joint resolution.
House Joint Resolution 1, sponsored by Capital Finance, amending Wyoming's Act of Admission for Earning. A joint resolution requesting Congress to introduce a bill and enact a law to amend Wyoming's Act of Admission to authorize the expenditure of earnings for the support of the common schools in Wyoming. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred House Joint Resolution 1, amending Wyoming's Act of Admission for Earnings, respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Alaman, Angelos, Bear, Haroldson, Pendergraft, Sherwood, Smith. Representative Bear, Chairman.
Do we have a Vice Chair of Appropriations here or a Chair of Appropriations? Pendergraft? Well, we need someone to make a motion. Oh, there we go. Okay, you've heard the reading of the bill or the joint resolution. What is your pleasure, Vice Chairman Pendergraft?
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise, it do so the whole rises to report, to do so with the recommendation that House Joint Resolution 1 do pass. And I turn the explanation of the resolution over to the former vice chair.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this House resolution has to be passed by 2/3 of this body on third reading. It's important in that as we've been looking at our investments and we talk about this total rate of return and then what goes into a corpus versus what we are allowed to spend, the good agency that oversees our investment has brought this issue to our attention over the last several years in wanting to get some terminology redefined on the acts of admission when Wyoming became a state. If you look at page 4, it gives a good example. It says, all lands herein granted into the educational purpose shall be disposed of only at public sale. The proceeds constitute a permanent school fund, the earnings of which shall only be, or the interest of which shall be expended in support, shall only be expended in support of schools. The rest has to go into the corpus or whatever. And there's been a modernization of where we don't just use interest anymore. You can have dividends, you can have other things that besides interest. And so we're applying to get those changed and to change the definition of interest and income to be earnings. And then that allows a broader use of the revenue generated off the investment of the revenue there. So with that, and so then this will go before we have to do this joint resolution, and then we submit this act forward. I think if memory serves me correctly, our neighbors to the west of it, west and south of us, have done this and was able to get that changed and cleaned up. It's an antiquated term, and we felt that it was time to get that done. So with that, I'd answer any questions or turn any further explanation over to my colleagues who also served on that committee.
Any further discussion on the joint resolution? Representative Nicholas.
So ladies and gentlemen, the sole purpose of this is so we can increase our returns, so we can have higher returns in our investment and use our investments more wisely and basically garner larger support. So it was brought to us by our good chief investment officer as this is the solution to help us get there. So I'm in favor.
Question?
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that I encourage an aye vote.
Any further discussion on the joint resolution? Question being called and seeing no further discussion. All those in favor of Vice Chair Pendergraft's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, does so with the recommendation that House Joint Resolution number 1 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. House Joint Resolution has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 275. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 275, sponsored by Representative Byron, Treatment of Animals, an act relating to crimes and offenses. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 275, Treatment of Animals, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation to pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Byron, Campbell, Connolly, Harshman, Jarvis, Provenza, Storer, Thayer, Wharf. Representative Byron, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Byron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 275 do pass. And I further move the adoption of the standing committee amendment, and will first discuss that standing committee amendment body, and then I will dive into the bill. The standing committee amendment, there was a drafting issue. my fault. I was moving too quick that first week and didn't catch it before we went live with the bill. And further, the standing committee amendment also changes the penalty. Currently, the penalty in the bill, if you're reading it closely or if you're not, but you should be, is a felony. That standing committee amendment does drop it down to a misdemeanor. It also adds, there's a provision in the bill that if you are convicted or potentially convicted of this, you may lose your fishing and hunting and trapping privileges up to a certain amount of time, which is 3 years, which was amended in that standing committee amendment. So, yeah, if you look at the standing committee amendment, page 1, it makes sure the section describing the effect of the bill covers everything. Page 2, line 17, addresses some of the concerns at wildlife. And bear with me here. There was some talk about cold-blooded animals, and we can think about the grip and grin that we all know. When you catch that cold-blooded animal and you stick it out a little further and make that cold-blooded animal look bigger for the social medias, it amends that. There's a grammatical change on page 3. Certainly appreciate that. And then the meat of it is on page 5, line 3, where the drafting error occurred, which gives the authority to our wonderful LE across the state. And surprisingly, in our committee, we did have the associations that represent those wonderful LE come and testify that those that patrol wider swaths of our counties supported this because they are often the ones that are boots on the ground seeing this behavior go on. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions about the standing committee amendment, but I ask for your favorable consideration.
Questions on the standing committee amendment? Question being called. All those in favor of the standing committee amendment number 1, say aye. Opposed, no. Standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Byron.
Thank you, Chairman. House Bill 275, treatment of animals, folks. We've talked about this. There's an interim committee, subcommittee that worked on this, and ultimately the work was very, very well done by a colleague in my side of the state. But at the end of the day, that bill is not going to get heard in committee, and we went this direction with their blessing. So I think we need to remember that what happened is not something we want to reflect on. What this is about the treatment of animals and making sure as sportsmen, hunters, and lovers of wildlife, we fulfill our desire to end that animal's life quickly. And that's what didn't happen. You know, folks, what we're trying to solve is a gap in the statute that allowed a very unfortunate incident to happen. As a sportsman, we do not need to be parading these animals around. We don't need to be using our phones for social media. This bill is very broad but very specific at the same time, and it sends a clear message to folks all across the world that we in Wyoming care about how we treat our animals, but also how we harvest our animals. So I'm happy to stand for questions, go into more details. A couple of the co-sponsors I think would like to speak. And with that, stand for questions.
Any questions or discussion on the bill? Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This incident happened to come from my hometown, a little cow town in western Wyoming, sits along the Green River. It's a really unfortunate incident. It's put a blemish on our state, it's put a blemish on our county, and it's really put a blemish on that little town. This is an activity that, if there's something good that happened, it brought this activity to light, I guess I should say. And we really need to look at this and end this kind of activity. I know this animal that's involved is considered a predator to many. It also has a younger cousin in that same family of critters, the coyote, that is considered just a coyote. But they're still wild animals, and they deserve to be treated with some respect. I am a coyote hunter. I am a hunter. But I've been taught from the time I can remember that when you take a life, you take it cleanly and quickly. There's a lot of our ranching community in that area that feel the same way. In fact, a lot of ranchers in the area don't even allow coyotes to be taken, simply because they keep the ground squirrels in check. And when they keep the ground squirrels in check, that keeps the badgers away that dig the big holes, that help them with their livestock. So we really need to think about this. We really need to push this bill forward, in my opinion. Something needs to be done. This body has the ability to do it, and I urge a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So when this bill first came forward, I think it was a better answer to the conversation than what we had seen earlier come out. And a couple concerns that I had was, how in the world are we going to prove out some of these things that we were talking about in here? And so I just applaud the committee and your bringing of your amendment that we already voted on. That fixed a lot of the issues that I saw with it. And this is what I'll say. I don't believe that this will be an issue, or it really has been an issue. But I believe that it's vitally important that we take a stand and take a step and say, you know what, even though we don't view this as being an issue, this will protect the ungulates, this will protect the species as we move forward. The hunting, trapping, and fishing community, we take very, very high levels of pride in what we do. I've fed my family for many, many years, and I've taken countless youth into the field, first-time hunters, and we have a duty to be ethical in how we treat these animals. And I believe this bill is a way where we can put into statute that which we practice. And I believe that this will also be a good statement to the world around us that what happened this last year is not something that we condone. And at the same time, it's not something that happens in Wyoming. And now we've given our Feathers and Fins entity the ability to take and to step up into and to take action if someone chooses to cross some lines. So on and for, and believe this is a good compromise on how we walk through this, but at the same time, protection for the animals of our great state.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I hate to interject my personal religious beliefs in this bill, but I do think it is an ethical necessity that we have this conversation. And in the first chapter of that first book, it says that as a commandment to us that we should be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish and the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And I take that seriously. It is our responsibility to care for and respect that creation that we have been given authority over. And so I do think that this bill is a step in the right direction.
Representative Weber.
Thank you. I have some concerns about this bill because it puts forth some issues that I don't think fits our Wyoming culture. The animal rights organization's end game is to eliminate hunting and trapping. So in creating a bill concerning a very isolated incident, this is an isolated incident. Passing a bill like this concerns me as a hunter. If this bill passes, I think there's some unintended consequences. I think it lets the anti-hunters and the anti-trappers advance to perhaps stopping all of the things that I like to do and a bunch of us like to do in Wyoming. If cruelty is defined as not instantly killing an animal, then what would be next? Banning trapping? Or if an animal is kept in so many hours of a leg hold trap or a snare? If we pass this bill, there will be unintended consequences. Don't let the dominoes fall. There is not more of a sickening sight than for a stockman to ride into a bunch of calves or sheep and see that they have been slaughtered by coyotes or wolves. It's like watching your bank account shrivel. No one is for or in favor of any animal to suffer more than necessary in the taking. The Daniel episode was highly isolated. Don't let animal rights groups from big cities chip away at our hunting and trapping. I am against this. I am a no, and I urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Byron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me address one of those questions. Trapping is carved out of this bill. So the concerns that were brought are not accurate because it has nothing to do with that. And folks, if you refer to page 3, number 9, knowingly or with intent to cause undue suffering, tortures, torments, or mutilates any living wildlife. As a sportsman, I don't do that, and you shouldn't either. As a sportsman, it is my goal to harvest the animal with a clean kill, a clean shot. It ends at that. To infer that this is coming from a big city, well, where the mountains are tall and pointy, that's not a big city. And where the Snake River and the Hoback River come together, that's even smaller. So this bill comes from there, nowhere else. So I push back on that, folks. This is clear. Read the bill and understand the facts, and happy to address any more questions as it relates to that.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe it was well stated earlier that it was an isolated incident that was discussed earlier, and this bill specifically addresses unethical behavior. It does not affect ethical sportsmen on and for this bill.
Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other thing that I forgot to mention, and it kind of falls in line with that unethical behavior thought, is I did meet with some folks in the, I think I can say this, the Upper Green River Valley, Kendall Valley, that do own land in the high country or up near the forest boundaries where they do get a lot of snow. Even though all their cattle are off those pastures and down below where they're feeding them in the winter. One of the other things that this activity creates is a lot of trespass issues. You know, those folks are up there, recreational riders up there in the high country, and the snow's deep enough, it covers a lot of those fences. And when they take off after one of these critters, a lot of times they're on private ground doing it. So this bill would help end that activity as well, in my view. On and again for the bill. Thank you.
Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This body has passed a lot of bills about things that we were worried about happening, but we had no idea if it was actually happening. This is something that actually happened that we could take care of, that we can make sure that we don't have a stain like that ever again. We can protect Wyoming's reputation knowing that we are ethical sportsmen. So on and for the bill.
Seeing no further discussion and hearing the question, all those in favor of Chairman Byron's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, does so with the recommendation that House Bill 275 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 275 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Joint Resolution 3. The reading clerk will read the joint resolution.
House Joint Resolution 3, sponsored by Representative Sherwood, support for rural schools. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Joint 3, support for rural schools, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Bratton, Erickson, Guggenmoss, Kelly, Lawley, Singh, Strzok, Williams. Representative Andrew, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Joint Resolution 3 do pass, and I turn over the explanation to the sponsor.
Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, body, for
your hours of really engaging conversation today. And I would ask for you to open your heart and your ears to listen to this one as well. So the idea for this joint resolution was brought to me by my constituents who had a very personal 5-year fight to reestablish a school in their community. In good weather, they live about 2 hours off of dirt roads from Laradice and about an hour and a half from the Villa of Wheat. So here's your history lesson for the day. From statehood through around the 1950s, more than 24 individual school districts were established on private ranches in the northern part of my district. In the 1970s, there was consolidation, and so we went from 24 individual school districts to 1, which I think we all agree is a good thing for resource allocation. But at the time then, the rural ranch communities were really nervous about losing their school districts and their rural schools. And so there was a promise made to my constituents at that time that there would always be rural schools in our state. Today, here's your trivia, there are 15 rural schools in Wyoming with 3 rooms or less that provide education to over 100 students in grades K through 8. And those rural schools are in 12 different districts. And I want to thank my diverse array of co-sponsors on this bill who each represent a district with a rural school. Our Constitution guarantees a high quality and equitable education for every one of our students. This resolution is meant to uphold an existing precedent and confirm our intent to honor our commitment to all students, regardless of where they are located in our state. And I'm going to end with a quote from a former superintendent of public instruction. No matter the zip code, no matter the size of the community, no matter where the student is from or traveling to school each day, and no matter what your socioeconomic status is, in Wyoming, we certainly believe and are committed to making sure that every student has access to a quality education. And with that, I ask for your support in this resolution, and I will take questions.
Any questions on the joint resolution? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Andrews' motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, does so with the recommendation that House Joint Resolution 3 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Joint Resolution 3 has passed committee of the whole. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 123. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 123, sponsored by Representative Nyman. Adverse possession, property tax payment defense, and act relating to civil procedure. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 123, adverse possession, property tax payment defense, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation to do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Banks, Davis, Eklund, Johnson, Ottman, Provenza, Schmid, Strzok, Winter. Representative Winter, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Winter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Bill number 123 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the standing committee amendment. And the sponsor of the bill will explain it.
Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Body, I bring to you today House Bill 123, Adverse Possession Property Tax Payment Defense, and I would also like to move the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. And I will, I guess what I can do is we'll do the bill and then I'll explain the amendment, and then we would hopefully ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason this came about is because of a deal that happened up in my neck of the woods. We had just recently leased a piece of property from another gentleman there, and we're out traveling over the property. And in the process of traveling over it, I was driving around with the gentleman, and he was looking for, what we were wanting to do was to expand the amount of water that was located on the ranch. Okay, so we're driving around, and we come to this fence, and he's watching on Onyx, and I come to this fence, and I'm assuming that's the end of the property that I've just leased. Well, I said, well, then I guess we'll turn around and go back. And he says, well, no. He said, this place goes on quite a bit further. And so I'm like, well, okay, well, we go up to the gate and it's got a chain on it with a padlock. Well, come to find out, the padlock was just set so it wasn't locked, but it was just enough to keep most people that don't want to get out and fool with a gate inside their trucks. Everybody turned around there and went back. So, okay, we opened that gate and continued on. Went quite a measurable distance and came to yet another locked gate. And I said, well, this it? And he says, no. He said, this property actually goes on quite a bit further. And so I'm like, all right, well, then I didn't realize I was being leased in this, so we continued on. Well, the next thing, down through a couple of draws, Nopra Hill, and dropped down over and see the neighbor's home site, another property. And I'm like, are we still on this land I'm supposed to be leasing? And he said, actually, we are. He said, there's no fence. And so we backed off, went back out. Come to find out, got on the Onyx maps and mapped out, and there was almost 200 acres of ground that was fenced into the neighbor's property. Well, make a long story short, I asked the guy I was going to lease the property from, if you want to continue to do that or trade or whatever the property with the other adjacent landowner, because obviously there's been some kind of an agreement, I said, just adjust the amount that you're going to charge me for the lease, and I'll pay you for less land, and you can make your deal with the other guy. Well, he says, no, you know, at my age, I said, I would really rather, let's just, while you're here, and this is a new lease, why don't we just see about putting the fence on the property line? And I said, okay, that's fine with me, no skin off my nose. So he asked me to reach out to him, made contact with him. Well, the other party involved said, you know, he said, I don't know. He said, you know, we've had that quite a while. I said, I don't know, but what we wouldn't maybe just want to move for an adverse possession on that property. And I thought at that moment, and that is the reason behind this piece of legislation. Currently, if you have, and according to state law, and I can read this to you, and as I dug into it, it's really rather interesting, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why I hope that you will go with me on this and kind of maybe reconsider some of the things we're doing. In Wyoming, adverse possession is the legal possession is the legal process that allows a person to claim ownership of a property by occupying it continuously for 10 years. In person, known as the adverse possessor, must meet certain requirements. The adverse possessor must occupy the property openly, exclusively, and continuously. And so here's the other part of that that's kind of interesting. Years ago, as many of these ranches were broke up, and many of you that have ranching history know, a lot of times fences were put on the place of easiest to maintain. If you had a lot of drifting country or something like that, you always put your fences on the tops of the ridges. Well, it doesn't always on the property line. And so you did it as convenience. They would probably last longer and be less costly to maintain. Well, many times ranches would exchange areas. You fence on top of this ridge, I will fence down through the bottom of this canyon. We will use the rim rock for the edge. We'll call it even, we'll work together, and then that'll make all of our lives a lot simpler. Well, in the life that we are living today, is a lot of folks are moving into this country and they see that as the opportunity to maybe say, you know what, that's been fenced into our property for some time. Maybe we ought to just adversely possess it. And here's the reasoning behind the bill. Immediately upon the notification to this gentleman that I think we might just take you to court, the issue I saw with this gentleman was the immediate stress and potential financial impact to him to have to hire an attorney and to protect himself and to protect private property that he owned outright and in good faith. He had paid consistently his property taxes on the land that was described on his deed. And that was the actual size and shape of his property. But these fences were well inside of his property line. And that's why I want to bring this. I want to make it so that if you have been paying consistently your property taxes, which we've been talking a lot about, the property taxes and what they bring to our state, but if you've been paying your property taxes consistently, I don't believe somebody should have the ability to even torture you with the idea that they could take and potentially cost you legal fees or take your property through adverse possession. You own that property. It's yours. You've been paying taxes consistently on it, and you should not have to defend that right in court or be charged a cost in hiring attorneys or whatever, or even, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, the mental strain and stress that I even saw on that gentleman's face as he's still dealing with a property boundary when the guy said, I think we might just see if we can get it from you. And so that's the reasoning behind this bill. And what it very straightforward and very cleanly does is it allows that if you have been consistently, if you look on page 2 of the bill, beginning at line 4, It says the time period of adverse possession necessary, which would be that 10 years we see, to establish a claim for adverse possession shall not run at any time that a person against whom the claim would be brought has paid all their taxes and assignments against the lands, tenants or hereditaments that would be in subject to adverse possession claim. And we found out what the word hereditaments was, and I'd have to give it over to the good chairman of Ag. We had to actually look that word up, but it basically means property or pieces or other things or assigns that go with it. And to bring now into the Standing Committee amendment, into the discussion that we had, we said that if you want to, and I'll move that committee amendment and would ask for your favorable consideration at this point. We inserted some language here in the bill that clearly defined when and where what that cost would be exacted and who would pay for it. And you go on to page 2, after line 9, we would insert, if the defendant to a claim for adverse possession or the actual landowner provides proof of proper title to the land, tenements or hereditaments of the plaintiff to the claim continue with, and what it's saying is, if they continue to force this issue, and they're going to take you to court, and they're going to try to take this property from you through adverse possession, the plaintiff, that person that is making this move on the other person's property, shall pay all costs and attorney's fees associated with the action of the plaintiff, loses the claim. So if you're going to come and you're going to go after somebody's property and engage in that, then you lose based on the fact that these folks actually own the land described and have been paying their taxes in good time and have had no problems. Then whoever brings this on somebody else should bear the responsibility and the costs. I don't believe you should have to try to pay to defend your own property that you own free and clear and have been paying your taxes on it. And so that's the nexus of the bill, ladies and gentlemen. I would be glad to ask your favorable consideration on this. This is quite frankly something that has changed, and I've actually, since I gave this committee, Agriculture Committee, the information, I've had multiple people that have called me and encouraged on this. He said, you know what, this is really happening. And he said, we really appreciate you doing this because, you know, this is changing. As people move in and buy these properties and bring money and they can challenge a lot of these private landowners, it is very real and it is an issue. So with that, I would ask for your favorable support. On the committee amendment first and then on the bill, please.
Any discussion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Question being called and seeing no discussion. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, please say aye. Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Further discussion on the bill. Seeing no discussion, question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Winter's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 123 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 123 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 186. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 186, sponsored by Representative Worf. Bear coupons, game and fish, and act relating to the game and fish. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 186. Bear coupons, game and fish, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Johnson, Schmid, Strzok, Winter. Noes, Representatives Davis, Eklund, Ottman, Provenza. Representative Winter, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Winter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Bill number 186 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee Amendment and the Committee of the Whole Amendment. And the sponsor of the bill will tell us all about it.
Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have before you House Bill 186, Bear Coupons, Game and Fish. What this bill does, it's very simple. It reinstates, up until 1987, when you bought an elk license, it came with a bear coupon attached. This bill basically directs the Game and Fish to create
a coupon again for bear hunting that would be concurrent with your elk license. So when you're out in the field elk hunting, if you happened on a bear, you could take that animal. And so there was some concern when you go through here. There was some concern on the committee. It wasn't clear that this did not impact the spring bear seasons, and it doesn't impact the fall bear seasons. The whole idea of this bill was to basically reinstate it on the regular price elk licenses. And so what you'll see, you go through the bill, it more or less just says that the department will put this coupon back onto the tag. It was mentioned, there was some concern that we might harvest too many black bears. And that was one reason why I went back, and you'll see an amendment I'm going to bring forward that reinstates some stuff. The standing committee they adopted Standing Committee 1, which basically struck bear and inserted grizzly throughout. It also, there's a section where it talked about brown, black, or grizzly, and it struck the brown or the black. So I'm going to ask the body to resist the standing committee and go with the committee of the whole amendment that I'd like to present. Do I do that next?
Is there any discussion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1?
But I do that after we vote this down, up and down.
Any further discussion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Question being called. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. No. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has not been adopted. We're back on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move Committee of the Whole Amendment, or Committee of the Whole to House Bill 186, Amendment 1. And what that does, Mr. Chairman, is it basically goes in and adds the clarity to the bill that it only applies to resident full-price licenses, elk licenses that would have the bear coupon attached to it. It deletes brown, but it leaves grizzly and black in there. And then on page 4, line 14, it says, after by the, we're going to insert full price. And after licenses, we're going to insert during the applicable elk hunting season. And it was brought up during the discussion. There was some concern, like I said, that there might be an over-harvest of these bears if we have guys able to go out and shoot them having an elk tag. And it was testified before the committee, the reason they did away with the bear coupon in 1987 was because they weren't getting the harvest that they wanted. And so for those that have some consternation or concern that we may be adding too much pressure on the bears, I think it's unfounded based on what they've said in the past. It had no use. So I would ask the body to adopt the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, please.
Any discussion on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1? Seeing none, question being called. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, please say aye. Opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I would ask the body to move this forward. I think it's something that is important. I think it's something that sends a message, and it allows us to start addressing overabundance and expansion of grizzly bears in the state by having the ability to harvest them. So with that, I'll ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this bill? Oh, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what this bill does is tells the people of Wyoming that you can go out and hunt grizzly bears. And under current law, that's not true. The federal law says you cannot. They have protections. There's severe penalties for violating those protections. We're talking prison time. And so I just wanted, one story I shared with the committee that day was, and hopefully you'll give me some leeway here, Mr. Chairman. I helped pass a law that gave felons their voting and their gun rights back. And that seemed like a great bill, and we provided a good fix, and we restored gun rights, and we did good by the people of Wyoming. And we've had to spend several interims working that bill because unfortunately people in Wyoming don't just get to get their gun rights back and not violate the federal law. And so what ended up happening is that people have been arrested because they thought under Wyoming law that they could get their guns. And under Wyoming law they could, but under federal law they couldn't. So that's on me. I have to sit with that weight. And we have to fix that legislation. And this bill, go ahead and go violate the federal law and consequences be darned. We don't care. You're putting the people of Wyoming in harm's way because they might not understand the federal law because you want to shake your fist at the federal government. That's what this bill is. This bill is a fist shaking. And additionally, Wyoming has a legacy of using science-based management to protect our heritage here, our wildlife, our open spaces. And this bill flies in the face of that. This bill says we don't need that legacy of protecting our wildlife. We know better. And then you put in jeopardy the concerns. So the feds who oversee what's endangered or not, they're going to, they'll make decisions and we can deal with that. We can be angry about how we manage wildlife from that perspective. But now you're telling them, well, we're not going to manage our wildlife based on science. We're just going to shoot them down if we get these coupons. This is bad policy. And we heard a bill in committee today that had to do with mountain lions. Similar issue. We are throwing away our legacy of using science to protect our wildlife for our future generations. It's our children that we want to be able to have the same hunting experiences that we have. And this bill flies in the face of that. It's mismanagement of wildlife. All based on a lie that we can protect the people of Wyoming from the federal government when we just can't on this one, folks.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do expose our hunters if we do pass this, but that would be up to the hunter to take that exposure if he wants to make this statement. In testimony, we did hear that more bears are taken since we took them off the elk license. That's what our good agency allowed, that there have been almost double the amount of bears harvested during any season, okay? The other thing is if you check out the physical note, there's a tremendous negative impact to the agency here. I mean, $225,000, that's an ongoing expense because we're going to have to put these licenses on the elk tag. That's a free license because you're only paying for the elk tag, so we're not selling the bear tags. So there's also several other things that we need to consider when going and looking at that. And other than that, it's just not a very, very well-written bill, so I'm opposed to it.
Representative Eklund.
Mr. Chairman, so I was a no vote on it also. The first thing that the bill does that's a real problem is it directs our Game and Fish Department to violate federal law. And if they were to do it, they would subject themselves to to federal prosecution for it, and they issued these kind of permits, the hunters that were hunting grizzly bears would be violating federal law. They'd be subject to federal law. And it's just, I can't see a way of making this work. And again, the bears, the black bears that we've been hunting have gone from 200 bears in 1981 or whenever they quit selling the tag with the elk tag to 600 and some. So hunters are getting a good crack at those bears, but not the grizzlies.
Representative Orff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You might say this is fist shaking. I believe this is the state of Wyoming standing up and exercising our sovereign rights. Unlike a lot of these things that happen, we see with the rejection of the last administration to delist grizzly bears under our management authority and a proposal to expand grizzly bear recovery to go all the way down to Kemmer, down to Rock Springs, and all the way over to the Bighorns. And I can tell you that, this is pushing back, and I'm mad. Grizzly bears met recovery goals back in 2000. There's a lot of people that showed up and spoke against this. They spoke in favor of the legacy of scientific wildlife management. I can tell you it's frustrating to me that on one hand they want to say to follow the science, and then when the courts interject themselves and interfere with the implementation of that science, we're told that we're supposed to sit down and shut up. And I guess that's not me. I'm going to stand up, I'm going to push back, and I'm going to assert our sovereignty. And that's what this is all about. And yes, it is potentially a problem. If you were to shoot a grizzly bear and go outside the state, it is a violation of the Lacey Act, and that's a big deal. I do believe that as residents, and that's why I made this bill, it's just on resident elk licenses that the coupon would be attached. As residents, I believe we can go kill grizzly bears. Anything that's outside the recovery area is the goal. This is the same argument we used when we delisted the wolves under the dual status plan, and it's the same argument I'm going to bring to you today. We have a recovered population of grizzly bears. We're being told that we have to allow them to move further south and further east. And I think we need to stop playing this game, allowing the goalposts to be moved at will, and we need to stop it. And I think this is the only way we can stop it, is by standing up and saying, we're not going to do it anymore. The bears that are going to the south or to the east are no longer contributing to a recovered grizzly bear population. It's the same argument we used to get wolves delisted, and I believe this puts us in a stronger position. The enacting clause doesn't go into effect until July 1st, 2026. It gives us another year. We would have another bite at this apple. It's my hope, and it's been my intention from the beginning, I want this to lead to grizzly bear delisting under state management. That's what this is proposed to do. As far as it was brought up, that the financial shows a significant loss. And I can tell you that was one of the things that was brought up, was why aren't we charging for this coupon? Prior to 1987, it was free when it was attached to your elk license. And frankly, I feel like the $60 million, all of which was sportsman money from license sales, that $60 million to me warrants the ability for us to give a free coupon out. And it was mentioned that under the new method where they removed the coupon, they have harvested more bears. That was in response to the fact that I said we've had some areas where we felt like maybe black bears were having an impact on mule deer populations. But I want to make it clear, just so the body understands, the amendment that we adopted made it very clear we are not doing anything to impact the current spring bear seasons, quota systems, same with the fall. It's not impacting any of that. All we are doing is adding to where if you're out, you happen to be hunting elk, and you stumble across the bear, you can take it. The reason why I didn't want it to just say strictly grizzly bears is because I don't want somebody that's out hunting to shoot an animal and walk over and find out that it's something that's not permitted. So to me, it was better, cleaner to just say flat out, we're going to kill a bear. Doesn't matter. The department acknowledged that the coupon in the past did not lead to a lot of bears being harvested. I think this is a non-threat. Really what this is, it's not just me shaking my fist. It's me trying to get this body to stand up and poke him right between the nose and kick him right in the groin. I'm mad, and I hope it's conveyed, because I do think until this state stands up and says is enough, is enough, is enough, we'll continue to see the goalposts move. So I urge an aye vote.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I so appreciate the frustration and the anger. I do. And am happy to shake a fist at the federal government when they dictate our ability to manage wildlife in our state. And I understand that anger, I do. And I am not going to support a bill that puts a target on our agency's back. Because the optics of this bill, that's what scares me, the optics of this bill. The optics of this bill sends the message to the federal government that we do not have confidence in our agency that oversees management. We're going to take it into our own hands. Even though that is not our intent, that is the optics that it creates, is that the state has stepped in and said, we're going to take this, we're going to manage it, and we're going to dictate to our wildlife management agency. Creates that optic that we do not have confidence in them. Instead of, I think our intent is to say we do have faith in that agency, we do have confidence in them, and we will support them in their fight against the feds. Our agency that oversees management sends everything they can to say, hey, we've managed this to an acceptable, take them off the list. And the feds don't. So I support their fight in that, and I don't want to put a target on their back, and that's exactly what this bill does, puts a target on their back.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In committee, sportsmen came and they pleaded for us not to do this. The sportsmen did. The people that want to hunt the bears we're talking about said, please don't do this. One of the reasons that they stated was that the state to the north of us did something very similar. And what they received in poking the federal government and saying, we know better, when they were shaking their fist, what they got in return was a cease and desist. And then they had to act accordingly. Again, the other consequence is you're saying, I want to shake my fist at the federal government, but you're shaking the fist of your constituents who then are going to go to prison all by themselves. That's a terrible way to make policy.
Representative Geringer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think this is yet again another one of those cases where we prop somebody up in between us and the federal government. I'm fighting mad too. I'm sick and tired of all of the stuff that the feds do to us. But I think there's better ways to do it rather than just say, hey, you, Mr. Sportsman, you go ahead. You fight the fight. We got nothing behind you. You go and do it. We're not putting our money where our mouth is to defend them. We're saying, you go take the risk. You run the risk of losing your hunting privileges. You run the risk of going to jail. You run the risk of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to fight the feds on our behalf. I think that we need to take a step back and say, yeah, let's fight the federal government, but let's fight it in the right way. And I don't think this is the right way.
Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like the concept of the bill, but I'm going to be a no vote. There's very few people in here that remember back, I think it was 2018, 19, there was a budget amendment passed that if any grizzlies that were caught, nuisance, that we could take them and drop them in California. How many times has that happened, on and against?
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That last one's pretty hard to beat there, but anyway, a person that represents us in the Far East along the shoreline of the Atlantic seems to feel that with possibly the new administration that a very favorable consideration will come up, and that by doing this, we're actually harming ourselves and not really helping ourselves. So I would leave it at that.
Representative Orff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to try to bring us home. I don't believe that we're painting a target on the backs of the game and fish. Our game and fish department has to be as frustrated as we are. And I can tell you, this last season, through agency action, there is over 60 bears, grizzly bears, that were removed. That doesn't mean they were taken to some other state. These were bears that were sent to the happy hunting grounds. And I think that's something that can't be lost on this body. We already kill bears. What the question is, who should be killing them? I know the game and fish, or the furs and feather guys, they are tired of having to take action. Their hands are tied. We continue to have to pay damage claims when they're sustained, and they have to take action. And a lot of times that action leads to a dead bear. I believe their hands are tied, and I believe that this action actually helps them. I'll remind you that the enacting clause is until July 1st, 2026. I believe that this gives us a better position. It allows us to send the message loud and clear. We have one U.S. congressman that is fighting to try to get them delisted as well. And I think this actually helps that cause. I think it shows that the state's serious, and I think the argument is valid. Just like I said with the wolves, the bears that are going to the south and the bears that are going to the east are not contributing biologically to any recovery of these animals that are protected. I think it comes down to whether or not you believe that the federal government's operating outside their enumerated powers. And I think that's what this is about. This is about the state exercising its 10th Amendment right and saying enough's enough. With COVID-19, we saw the government take action.
Point of order.
What's your point?
I don't know what COVID has to do with bears.
I'll tell you in just a minute, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Try to keep it in, but okay.
I'm pulling it in.
Okay.
We were told certain things that we had to do. We had our rights denied by the government, and largely because our governor cited and said we needed to do that. I believe grizzly bears are every bit as real a threat to the people that live and recreate in this state. And I think our governor has that same right. In fact, I think he has a duty and obligation.
Point of order.
What's your point?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we can't say proper names. Chief
Sorry,
Executive.
executive.
Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
correction.
Our executive downstairs, I believe that he has the ability to exercise authority to protect our human health and safety against grizzly bears. We know as they push further south and east, it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. Are they going to come into conflict with the existing practices that are in place? And ladies and gentlemen, that's a dead person. A grizzly bear is either going to kill, maim, or seriously hurt somebody. And that is why I do think we need to stand up. We need to say enough's enough, and we can give them the option. We got a year to figure this out, but I would ask the body to pass this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Couple clarifications on the last speaker. The agency that oversees all this came to committee. They don't want this. They didn't say that this was good for them. Second, there have been maybe 2 confirmed grizzly fatal attacks in the last 50 years. If a grizzly is attacking you, you can shoot that bear. So there's nothing to say that you have to lay down and let the bear eat you alive. Yeah, so I just wanted to make those clarifications on those points because they're not true.
Representative Winter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, we can say all we want to about how wonderful these bears are, but bears and all wildlife have to be managed. And the management is not coming to the state of Wyoming through the feds. So, our department that manages wildlife would be more than willing to take care of the problem. But they're hamstrung with the rules, I guess, that are presented to them. So as the sponsor of the bill indicated, the people will have to decide what to do here, but we need to remember that these bears need to be managed and that our wildlife agency is doing all they can and the feds are not helping at all. So we need to send a message to our federal government. So vote aye on the bill.
Any further discussion, Representative Orff?
I am just going to wrap it up real quick. I needed to make one clarification. This is a bear coupon, but I don't want the individual sitting to my immediate left to be concerned that he is on that. He is exempt from this, just so the body knows. I know that might have cost me a couple votes, but I want to make it clear that he's not on the table. But I do think this is serious, and I would urge the body's support. Like I said, we have a year to fix it. I believe we need to maintain a strong position, and we need to stand for our 10th Amendment rights. We need to stand for the biology and the science. Grizzly bears met recovery goals in 2000, and I would argue that the Game and Fish does in fact want this monkey off their back. They might not want it under the terms of this bill, but they want him delisted, and that's the whole purpose of this bill. I want it not to be lost on the body. This is to get grizzly bears delisted, whether it's under this method or another, but this is to put heat and keep driving the point home. So I would ask an aye vote. Thank you for your time.
Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Winter's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, does so with the recommendation that House Bill 186 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. House Bill 186 has failed a voice vote. Therefore, a standing division vote is required. All those in favor, please rise. Okay, all those opposed, please stand. All right, having failed a standing division vote, a roll call vote is required. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Ellamand, excused. Andrew? Angelos? Banks, excused. Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown, Gary? Brown, Landon? Byron? Campbell Elisa? Campbell Kevin? Chestick? Clauston? Connolly? Davis? Eklund? Erickson? Feiler? Geringer? Guggenmoss? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Heft? Jarvis? Repeat? Johnson? Kelly? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Lean? Locke? Lucas? McCann? Nicholas? Ottman? Pendergraft? Posey? Provenza? Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams? Repeat? Schmid? Sherwood? Singh? Smith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Thayer? Washut? Wasserberger? Webb? Weber? Worf? Williams? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Mr. Speaker? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 26 aye, 32 no, 4 excused.
Having pursuant to House Rule 6-6B, House Bill, no, I lost my 186, having failed a roll call vote, is indefinitely postponed. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries.
Division. You're good. Get whatever you need, fella. Okay, the reading clerk will read the Committee of the Whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 282, due pass amended. House Bill 83, due pass amended. House Bill 72, due pass amended. House Bill 235, due pass amended. House Bill 200, due pass amended. House Bill 245, due pass amended. House Bill 202, due pass amended. House Bill 273, due pass. House Bill 85, due pass amended. House Bill 181, due pass amended. House Bill 4, due pass. House Bill 205, due pass. House Joint Resolution 1, due pass. House Bill 275, due pass amended. House Joint 3, due pass. House Bill 123, due pass amended. House Bill 186 failed to pass Committee of the Whole and was indefinitely postponed. Representative Larson, JT, Chairman.
I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Congratulations, Representative JT Larson. Reports from standing committees. Reports from standing committees.
House Bill 113, sponsored by Representative Smith. Insurance payments not taxable, an act related to taxation and revenue. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3 Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 113, insurance payments not taxable. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Brown, Campbell, Locke, Lucas, Stivar. Noes, Representatives Lean, Storer, Wharf. Excused, Representative Riggins. Representative Locke, Chairman. House Bill 117, sponsored by Water, Omnibus Water Bill Construction, an act relating to water development projects. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom was referred to House Bill 117, Omnibus Water Bill Construction, respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Davis, Eklund, Johnson, Ottman, Provenza, Schmid, Strzok, Winter. Representative Winter, Chairman. House Bill 136, sponsored by Representative Byron. Volunteer First Responder Health Insurance Revisions, an act relating to compensation and benefits. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 136, Volunteer First Responder Health Insurance Revisions. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Byron, Campbell, Connolly, Harshman, Jarvis, Provenza, Storer, Thayer, Wharf. Representative Byron, Chairman. House Bill 179, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd. Department of Transportation Land Transfer, an act relating to state lands. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 179, Department of Transportation Land Transfer. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Brown, Geringer, Larson, McCann, Nicholas, Posey, Tarver, Wiley. Excused, Representative Banks. Representative Brown, Chairman. House Bill 219, sponsored by Representative Locke. County and municipal roads on state lands, easements granted, an act relating to state lands. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 219, County and municipal roads on state lands, easements granted. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Davis, Eklund, Johnson, Ottman, Provenza, Schmid, Strzok, Winter. Representative Winter, Chairman. House Bill 228, sponsored by Representative Knapp. Prohibition on private funds for conducting elections, an act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 228, Prohibition on private funds for conducting elections. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Bear, Haroldson, Pendergraph, Smith. Noes, Representative Sherwood. Excused, Representative Alaman. Representative Bear, Chairman. House Bill 294, sponsored by Representative Bear, Federal Mineral Royalties Distribution Amendments, an act relating to state funds. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 294, Federal Mineral Royalties Distribution Amendments. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Bear, Haroldson, Pendergraph, Smith. Noes, Representative Sherwood. Excused, Representative Alaman. Representative Bear, Chairman. House Bill 311, sponsored by Representative Locke. Exemption for transport of fuel and power sales amendments, an act relating to taxation and revenue. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 311, exemption for transported fuel and power sales amendments. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Brown, Campbell, Lean, Locke, Lucas, Stivar. Noes, Representative Storer and Wharf. Excused, Representative Riggins. Representative Locke, Chairman. House Bill 299, sponsored by Representative Posey, Online Sports Wagering Amendments, an act relating to gaming. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 299, Online Sports Wagering Amendments. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Byron, Campbell, Connolly, Harshman, Jarvis, Provenza, Storer, Thayer, Wharf. Representative Byron, Chairman. House Bill 324, sponsored by Representative Andrew, State Elected Officials, Employees at Will, and Regulations, an act relating to state officers. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 324, State Elected Officials, Employees at Will and Regulations, respectively report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Bratton, Erickson, Guggenmoss, Kelly, Singh, Strzok, Williams. Excuse, Representative Lawley. Representative Andrew, Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. Messages from the Senate. Or no. Oh, that's right. We do have one re-referral. Committee 5, Representative Chairman Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know what the terminology is here, but I'd like to re-refer House Bill 117 to Committee Number 2, Appropriations.
Thank you. Okay, now on to messages from the Senate.
Message 204. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 69, Homeowner Property Tax Exemption. Ayes 23, noes 8. Message 205. Mr. Speaker, the Senate adopted the Committee of the Whole report, failing the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 68, Government-Owned Lands. Ayes 11, noes 16, excused 3, conflict 1. The bill has been indefinitely postponed. Message 206. Mr. Speaker, the Senate adopted the Committee of the Whole report, failing the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 85, Constitutional Enforcement of Localities. Ayes 6, noes 23, excused 2. This bill has been indefinitely postponed. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Thank you, reading clerk. Committee announcements. Don't rush at once. Representative Rodriguez-Williams, number 10, Labor Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 10 will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We will hear House Bill 339, Homeowners Association Display of Political Signs, House Bill 250, Defining Life and the Rights of Natural Persons, and House Bill 289, Certificate of Need Repeal. We will also meet upon adjournment if we don't finish in the morning.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Washut, Chairman, Judiciary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1 will meet at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning in our normal room to hear House Bill 329, Office of Homeland Security Amendments, House Bill 102, Attorney General Elected, House Bill 280, Sex Offender Registration, and House Bill 190 will be worked by the committee. The public comment has closed.
Thank you, Chairman Washut. Chairman Knapp, number 7, Corps.
Mr. Speaker, your Corporations Committee number 7 will meet tomorrow upon noon recess for House Bills 249, runoff elections, 296, constitutional apportionment, 144, county canvassing board, and then we will meet again upon adjournment for House Bill 262 and House Bill 215.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. Chairman Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, miscellaneous, will meet Wednesday upon noon recess in Capitol Extension Room 3 to hear 3 bills. House Bill 255, Mobile Home Certificate Information Disclosure Requirements. House Bill 120, Administrative Procedure Jury Trial for Penalties. And House Bill 257, Barber Apprenticeships. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Heiner, number 9, Minerals.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9, Minerals, will meet tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. to finish up with House Bill 192, Public Utilities, Wildfire Mitigation and Liability, and finish with House Bill 209, Reliable and Dispatchable Low Carbon Standards.
Thank you, Chairman Heiner. Chairman Bear, number 2, Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 2 will meet tomorrow upon noon recess to discuss House Bill 274, Biological Males in Women's Sports as a re-referred bill, House Bill 101, Forest Health Grant Program number 3, House Bill 292, Budget Reserves Recommendation Appropriation Amount, continued from February 3rd, and House Bill 320, Taxation Revenue Task Force 2028, as time permits, and any re-referrals as assigned.
Any other announcements? Seeing none. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House adjourn until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. 9 a.m., you heard me. 9 a.m., if we got a big day tomorrow. So that would be February 5th, I believe it is.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Motion passed. Division. All motion passed. Yeah, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you tomorrow morning at, again, 9 a.m., the 17th day of session 2025, February the 5th, 68th Legislature. Good evening, everyone.